reputedly has one of the biggest gear ratios on for today's stage. He's riding a 39-tooth sprocket on the front and a 27-tooth sprocket in the rear, so he's obviously thinking about some special performance this afternoon. It's also reputed that Francesco Casagrande, Bob, is using a 30-tooth inside chainring. I didn't think they made those for road bikes.
He must have a special crank from the mountain bike coming over to his road bike. A 30 by 27, 28. That's a very small gear, and he is a fantastic climber. 43 seconds from Simoni up to Belli. Casagrande, a fantastic climber. If he needs a 30, one shudders to think what we might need to climb that hill.
Crampons, I think, would be the best answer of the day. This is the time gap now between Vladimiro Belli on the left-hand side there and the pink jersey group, 43 seconds. Gilberto Simoni, for the moment, Phil, looking very comfortable indeed, and I do notice he's riding a slightly different bike to the rest of the team, a bike that was specially brought in for this stage, a very light machine, and he's got a special saddle on that he's been working on for the last couple of years.
That's right. In fact, he's been assisting here, a company in the United States, and the saddle, you can probably just see it there now. It is in fact the longest saddle in the peloton. It is 30 centimeters in length, and that was nice of him to stand up, Paul, on cue, so we could have a look at it. But we're hoping to get one of those saddles in the studio, and we'll show it to you, because I say it's the longest saddle in the business, and the UCI, the world governing body, had to amend the race regulations, which they did in February this year, to allow him to ride on that saddle. It's called the Arione, and we're hoping to have one to show you later on in the week.
Vladimiro Belli, for the moment, is still surviving off the front end of the main field, but Bob, I don't think he's going to win himself this stage right now, although he had a good start at the bottom of the climb. The heads of state of climbing are here right now, and Marco Pantani, for the moment there in the yellow jersey, looking very comfortable indeed. And it may well be that after so long out of competition, a very turbulent last 2 years for Marco Pantani, he's ridden himself in. He's an older rider, and coming into the 12th day of racing, he may well just have the climbing legs of old.
Yes, it's great to see Pantani back in the front of a big climb like this. It's been a long time since we've seen it, and if Pantani can get some fitness like he has been doing throughout the first 10 days of the Giro d'Italia, he could really put in some scintillating climbs. I'm sure that it's still in the legs for him to do. He just needs to get his mind wrapped around it, and I think feeling good on one climb, especially one as fearsome as this, would go a long way in helping Pantani to regain his morale and confidence and start to get back. 6 kilometers to go now. Interestingly, the two biggest stars of the Giro d'Italia, Mario Cipollini and Gilberto Simoni, both racing on American-made bicycles, and Simoni is racing on the Cannondale bike, special climbing bike, right to the limit of the UCI's 15.5 pounds, which is the minimum limit for a bicycle. So I'm sure that his is as close as you can get to that without going underneath it.
It's probably 15.51, I would think. Everything has been done to make that absolutely spot on for today's event, because it really is a very difficult climb. And the strange thing about this climb, as Phil said earlier on, the closer you get to the summit, the more difficult this climb becomes. It gets up towards the top to an average gradient of 22% for the last few kilometers, with one moment where it kicks up to 27%, and that really is quite remarkable. Gasparoni is the man on the front here in the yellow jersey of Mercatoni Uno. He's doing an excellent job setting up the pacemaking for Marco Pantani there with the balding head, and he looks completely different, Bob, since he's had that ear job done during the winter.
Yes, he had his ears taped back, surgically reduced, I guess you could say. I'm sure it's a lot more aerodynamic. His hearing might not be quite as acute, but on a climb like this, I don't think you need to hear anything except your own breathing.
You certainly don't. Another man close to the front here is also Eddie Mazzolini. He'll be looking after the performances of Stefano Garzelli. Garzelli riding very comfortably at the front end. He had a very difficult day, I thought, on the Terminillo, and it was very much a psychological battle between Garzelli and Simoni, I think, for the victory at the top of that climb. And since then, Phil, he may also have ridden himself in, because he too is one of these riders who's been out of the sport for almost 12 months.
Yes, but he's certainly riding the race of his life so far. And so is this man here, Vladimiro Belli, still setting the tempo. Unfortunately, as we've never been able on television to show just how steep the gradients are, how they appear. As Gasparoni's just about to crack there, he's done his pacemaking. But this is such a steep climb, and I never cease to be amazed at how fast these riders pedal up the climbs.
It is truly amazing how fast they climb these hills. Eddie Mazzolini now has taken over the pacemaking as Gasparoni dropped off. Mazzolini, the teammate of Garzelli, setting a really torrid pace now. I think they'll start to eat into Belli's lead, and we'll see for the attacks tracks. We're going to get into the 5 kilometers to go banner there. And Belli putting in a great climb. If he could win a stage here, it would be a fantastic result for him. A little bit beleaguered. He was on Fossa Bortolo last year. Went over to the Lampre squad with Francesco Casagrande. And I think he's still smarting a little bit from that expulsion from the Giro, where I thought he was defending himself against outrageous behavior by the fans, which I think you should be allowed to do. He reached out, he thumped the guy on the head, clearly did that, but I think that the comportment of the fans also has to be taken into account, and they were right in the riders' faces, blocking the road almost, so I didn't think that that was justified.
And if you remember at the time, that was the Simone hooligans, they called themselves, coming inside the 5 kilometer banner for the chasers right now. It's a 40-second advantage for the lone leader. And Vladimiro Belli, as we said earlier, has been a professional since 1992. He's always been a good man in the big long stage races, Phil. And in fact, the first time I remember seeing him was in the Kellogg's Tour of Britain, where I think he finished 2nd overall. Yeah,
that's right. Well, there's the latest gap, 43 seconds, they're saying. And we are inside at 3 miles to the summit, but what a 3 miles that is. It's going to still take us about 20 minutes, and that's only for the front runners, because the rest of the field today are a long, long way behind. This is the battle now for the next destiny of the pink jersey. We'll be back for the finish. Well, we are at the part of the climb of the Zoncolan now, which is the press centre for the day's Giro d'Italia stage, because the press and everybody else have had their difficulties going straight to the top of the mountain, and all the facilities are here. And so they'll be watching on the barriers, and they're going to see Vladimiro Belli leading by about 43 seconds over the pink jerseyed chase group of Simone. There he is. Now, Paul, you've got the gradients out for these last 4 kilometres there.
Absolutely horrendous reading if you're not a climber, because it's around about now that the climb begins to kick up. Initially it kicks up to 18%, then towards the summit 27%. Let's not forget, let's remind ourselves, this climb is 5,600 feet in altitude at the summit. The average gradient is 9%, but you can knock that right out of the window for the moment, Phil, because this is the time when the race really starts to get steep.
Well, I thought we were going to see a picture of Garzelli attacking there, Bob, but the camera broke up. We're back with him now, and that's Garzelli in 2nd place. Now, Garzelli has said he will attack. We saw Garzelli and Simone go mano a mano up the Terminillo, and it could well be the way it's going today.
Well, they are closing in on Vladimiro Belli. The last check was only 26 seconds. I'll bet that's a little bit less now. They can just see him right up the road. If Garzelli, if Garzelli does attack, it will be matched by that man in the pink jersey, I'm sure. He's pedaling so effortlessly so far. It doesn't even look like he started to break a sweat yet. He's been able to take some sips of water. And here you see some of the riders that are chasing to try to get back on. Looks like it might be Pelizzotti from the Alessio team at the front of the 2nd group on the road there. These riders are chasing Vladimiro Belli, who's just about 20 seconds ahead of him. Eddie Mazzolini doing a great ride for his team boss, Stefano Garzelli. And once Mazzolini pulls off, we expect to see an attack from Garzelli. That's what he's promised to do. And here's Belli, the front of the race, trying to hang on to a very slim margin now and looking at some very steep grades.
Look at that, one man disappearing from the top of the overall classification, Phil, Pavel Tonkov, at the moment 1 minute and 24 seconds behind the lone leader on the road, Vladimiro Belli. So he's a man who will rocket out of the top 10. He's currently at the start of the day in 5th place in the overall classification. But the man on the front here, Eddie Mazzolini, is doing an absolutely superb job for his team. He had a very good start to the early season classics in the Ardennes, when I think he finished 9th and 10th. Now look at this, Simone's off.
This is the first acceleration from the race leaders. Gilberto Simone, mastered by Casagrande, followed by Popovic, and then just behind Garzelli. This young Popovic at 23 is turning out to be something rather special, isn't he?
Brilliant bike rider. We saw him last year riding superbly. This year is more like a confirmation, and he's going to pull himself high up in the classification. This is how you bang the hand on the table and say, I am the boss, and that's exactly what Gilberto Simone is doing right now. He wants to try and put time between himself and Francesco Casagrande on the right-hand side there. Francesco Casagrande, who I think today, Bob, looks as if he's in pretty fine form.
Yes, he's doing a great ride so far. He's been right there. This is the initial acceleration. I think Simone will keep doing that. He'll keep attacking all the way to the end, and let's just see what kind of damage is done. It looks like the first man is going to be Marco Pantani that's in trouble. That's a shame, because he was doing a great ride so far. Or it looks like he's closing the gap now. Here comes Simone. More accelerations as we go around these. Pantani in a bit of difficulty there, and Simone is flying up the hill. He was matched by Popovich and Casagrande. Here's Belli right at the front. They'll probably be sweeping past him in just a moment's time.
Yo.
There it is. That's the catch on Belli. And only Casagrande at the moment being able to go pedal stroke for pedal stroke. Popovich is hanging on and Garzelli is hanging on. But Simoni, this is what he was looking forward to throughout the whole Giro. He hasn't waited for it. He's been on the attack constantly, and he's back on the attack again today as we get into the very steep. And Garzelli looks like he's in trouble. Popovich opening up a gap now.
Well, this gradient here has gone up from 18 to 20%. We've still got to get there to the 27%, which is around about a mile to go from the finish. That was Scarpone, a brief glimpse of him going off the back of the group. Marco Pantani also trying to ride at his own rhythm, and I think all you can do on gradients like this, Phil, is just ride at your own speed. It really is now becoming a question of survival.
But look at this, Casagrande. He was in big trouble on the Terminillo. I mean, he might be in big trouble here now because Simoni has done a third acceleration. He hit them again on that 18% corner and broke them up, and this time he's gone once more. He really is riding like a powerhouse this year, anxious to avenge being thrown out of the Tour last year for the non-negative report on the use of cocaine. He was later exonerated, all too late of course. His tour was over. He's come back here as a very angry man. And now we're looking here at the cheers of Pantani. No, he's not winning the stage today, but he is riding superb. He's now coming up alongside Popovich, and he's still got Garzelli in his sights.
I would say this is a brilliant ride by Marco Pantani. Il Pirata has flown the flag high again, and he is riding himself into this Giro d'Italia. Francesco Casagrande could not match that acceleration of the man in the pink jersey, Gilberto Simoni, but he's actually not losing too much ground right now, Phil, and I think he will just try and ride his own rhythm and maybe claw his way back to the leader on the road. But this was a superb performance by the man in the pink jersey, showing complete domination. Garzelli recovering as well. Look at the gears that they're using though, Bob. They're in really small gears, just ticking them over.
Well, Garzelli has changed his pedaling rhythm from the Terminillo. He's using a much smaller gear on this climb, trying to conserve his strength, and he is riding a very smart race. He didn't try to match the accelerations of an obvious on-fire Simoni, and he's riding at a more steady rhythm. He's going to gradually try to close that gap down, but it looks like Simoni is kicking again as the road turns here and goes steeper again, and they can see him right up the road, so they know exactly what they have to do. It's just a question of whether or not the legs will respond.
This is fabulous riding by Stefano Garzelli, who really came back to competition only about 2 weeks before the start of the Giro d'Italia. He was in a bit of difficulty a few moments ago and he's recovered, but so has Marco Pantani. This is remarkable, Phil, because this man, we saw him ride a very dominant first week of racing. We thought it may well have been bravado, but the form is coming back for Elefantino.
Well, I can hear many viewers cheering here for Marco Pantani. They've admired him as a great climber. He's had some rough years in the last couple of years with all sorts of scandals surrounding him, but he's worked hard to overcome them. Psychologically, he's had to do it. Now, we're looking here at the general classification as it was this morning. Garzelli is still there. Noe has gone. Pelazzotti has gone. Tonkov has gone. Popovich at the moment likely to come up into third place, but Pantani, Paul, could make the top 6 here.
Would be absolutely superb. He has been a brilliant bike rider over the years, and right now he really is doing a very splendid performance on the slopes of this unknown climb to most of these bike riders, the Monte Zoncolan. On the left-hand side there, you can see the performance there of the man who leads this bike race, Gilberto Simoni, and look at Il Pirata. He's seen Garzelli going off the front, and he's in fact trying to ride around the outside of Francesco Casagrande. What an unbelievable steepness in these corners. It's kicking up to 22% at some point.
They still make it look as though it's no climb at all. Look at the crowd here. The cheers for Simoni, but if we get another shot there of Marco Pantani, watch the crowd reaction as they cheer Il Pirata. I'm sure they don't realise that he was in this group. He's cracked Casagrande. He's caught now Garzelli. This man is going forward to look now for the race leader. This is unbelievable.
Fabulous. So good to see Marco Pantani back at the top end of the sport. We've watched him win the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia in the past, but Bob, it really is a sign that he has ridden himself back into good condition here in the Giro d'Italia to be where he is right now.
Well, all of Italy will go absolutely ballistic if Pantani can follow through on the matching of the pace of Garzelli that he's done and try to close the gap. It's such a narrow road that the riders couldn't probably get past that caravan even if they had the legs to, because there's so many people. It's such a narrow road. This is a bit of a dangerous situation. Pantani is trying to stay with Garzelli, and Garzelli is in a desperate chase elusive, our lone leader, Gilberto Simoni.
Well, two former teammates together here. In fact, at one time, Garzelli was the domestique for Marco Pantani, but then the domestique became the leader, and I think the friendship separated them from the team that they were both on at the time. But look at this. You get an idea now to see just how difficult this climb is. It really does look like a mountain bike race, Phil.
It looks steep now, and the Tifosi are shouting on two men very similar in style, similar in build, similar in their racing jerseys, and it's Marco Pantani, Stefano Garzelli just behind them. We've got Popovic popping into our picture, and we've also got the other rider there, and that is Casagrande. Here we go, as the pressure goes on again. Il Pirata suddenly has found that those wings haven't completely fallen off his back. He's digging again now, and what's more, he knows he's riding well. Yes, he's suffering, but the body is telling him it's coming back.
Everybody is suffering on this climb here at the moment. It's really kicked up to an unbelievable gradient. This man is looking very calm and collected at the front end of the bike race, Gilberto Simoni. A quick glance over his shoulder there, Bob, to look to see where this very steep part of the course is, where it kicks up to 27%. But Il Pirata, I think, has been rejuvenated this year at the Giro d'Italia. And look at this, Garzelli coming back. He wants to go forward. He wants to try and pull himself back to Simoni, but that's a tall order.
He's one of the hardest, sorry Bob, I was just saying, Garzelli's one of the hardest men to crack, isn't he? He just like a limpet, he won't let go.
Well, he has a very steady rhythm on the climbs. He's a very powerful bike rider. He's also quite a good time trialist. We've seen him do good in sprints even. 1 kilometer to go for Simoni. He's really flying up the mountain at this point. He's already passed the steepest part perhaps, and this is the last kilometer, but it's still very steep, and at every pedal stroke he's putting in a little bit more time into Garzelli. But Garzelli is doing a great ride to stay this close, I believe. And Pantani, this is the most amazing thing. I don't think we ever thought we would see Pantani be able to come back up to this level. They got about 24 seconds behind Simoni, and Simoni is flying towards the finish line. But what a ride by Marco Pantani from the depths of depression and from the depths of non-training and sponsorship problems and all kinds of craziness from Pantani. He's back in the bike race, and it's great to see Il Pirata, Elefantino climbing with the very best in the Giro d'Italia this year. It's an unbelievable ride.
Well, we won't know until we get all of the times, of course, with Pantani could be riding for a place in the top 6 right now. But this is still going to be a battle of seconds overall, Paul, because he might win Simoni by about 30 seconds and he gets a bonus, but so too will Garzelli. It's still going to be about seconds tomorrow.
It's going to be a very close battle still, and let's not forget we've got a very long time trial coming up in a couple of days' time, a 40-kilometer time trial. Garzelli is the better time trialist. That is where the weakness comes in Gilberto Simoni's attack on winning the Giro d'Italia. He will, I think, lose a serious amount of time, but look at this, throwing down the gauntlet or what? Marco Pantani comes through on the inside where it's very steep, but look at this right now for the lone leader, Gilberto Simoni. Look at the pavement. It's an unbelievable road here. It's almost breaking up because of the frost through the winter months, but it looks to me as if Gilberto Simoni is having to dig rather deeper than he expected to try and win this stage.
We're looking at a man here on the right of our picture, on the far right indeed, Marco Pantani, who has not won a bicycle race since July in the year 2000. He's been all sorts of trouble with the authorities. Mentally, he's been in a state of depression. He's been involved in car crashes, bicycle race crashes. He's even had a suspended prison sentence slapped on him. And now he's finally got out of that deep, dark hole, and he's put himself back in the action.
Quite remarkable, because of all the psychological problems he's had, he's got himself back. But look at the young man there in the white jersey. This is Popovic, Phil. He is doing a very good bike ride as well, because he started the day in 6th place in the overall classification, and he's going to move up in leaps and bounds as Francesco Casagrande gives us an idea of just how difficult and brutal this climb is.
It looks like Garzelli is putting a little move on Pantani there. Great ride by Popovic. Casagrande in a world of hurt, just pouring sweat off of his cranium, and Frankie Bighouse putting in a good ride himself. He'll move up in the classification. We haven't seen down the hill the damage that's been done to the top 10. We haven't seen Andrea Noah. We haven't seen Tonkov, although we got word that he was dropped. Georg Tochnig, all of them in trouble. All of our top 10 guys. Pelizzotti we haven't seen either. We'll just have to wait till the end of the bike race to see what kind of damage this climb has done to the race. And it's all because of this man right here, Gilberto Simoni. He's struggling a little bit right now. He's putting everything into this climb, and we'll have to see what the time gap is. And look at Stefano Garzelli trying to close the gap. Casagrande coming back to Garzelli and Pantani. What a battle we're having today.
Absolutely fabulous pictures coming from the top of this mountain in glorious conditions, a little bit chilly, but the sun is shining on these riders. And Marco Pantani announced his return today, that's for sure. Such a different climb to the Terminillo when riders had different types of effort to make there. The same man is about to win the stage though, Gilberto Simoni. This will be his 11th day. He's held a pink jersey in the Giro d'Italia. He'll increase his lead, but just to make sure he doesn't increase it by too much, there is still a reaction there from Garzelli, who's looking for seconds saved if he can. Because as Paul Sherwen has said, in the 3 or 4 days' time in the time trial, the advantage could go back to Garzelli. He could recover the lead of this tour. And Pantani now, Bob, has cracked just a little bit, but he's still back.
He's cracking a little bit, but that's a fantastic ride. Simoni now putting in the final accelerations of the last kilometer. I think it's the longest last kilometer we've ever seen in a bike race.
I think you're right. But he's coming up towards the line now. He's about to make that grimace into a smile, I think, as he heads up to the finishing line. Gilberto Simoni, another stage win for him. And when it really counts at the top of a mountain, kisses to the crowd. The clock starts now, and all of the gaps now are in his favour because it increases his overall lead in the Giro d'Italia. Because today, the man who leads the race really has won the daily stage. And up comes Garzelli. 14 seconds has gone by. He was 2 seconds behind this morning. He will lose a few seconds in time bonus, but not very much, and he'll lose a little bit in real time as he comes up to the line. Well, Pantani is going to get 3rd place, and he's looking for a top 6 overall position. He better watch out though, because Popovic is closing in rather quickly. Garzelli, 34 seconds the clock says he has lost, and so he'll be about 40 seconds behind. Casagrande, Popovic, all just got over the top of Pantani by the line.
But I think Marco Pantani, at the end of the day, when he looks at the overall classification, will be very pleased with his performance today, Phil. But what a great ride that was by Gilberto Simoni. And if you wonder where most of these people came from, they were able to come up here by cable car. Andrea Noe as well has had a fairly anonymous climb up here, Bob, but he still is in the action. He won't slip too far down in the overall classification, and just sneaking in front of him there was Perez.
A little bit over 1 minute.
He might keep his 3rd place there, Bob.
Yes, indeed, a little bit over 1 minute behind Simoni for Noe, the rider from the Alessio team. And here comes Frigo and Gonzalez. Not a bad effort. They lost a lot more time than this on the Terminillo, so that's a great effort by Gonzalez and Frigo clawing their way back into the bike race. And you never know until it's over, and Marco Pantani said it wasn't over. There's Frigo. Now he's coming across the line. Marco Pantani, an incredible ride, said that his career wasn't over. Nobody believed him, but he's made a lot of believers today. 5th place on the stage, but more importantly, right in with our big favorites.
Just coming in ahead there of Dario Frigo with Scarponi. There's Raimundus Rumsas, and Tocznik as well, moving himself up to the top end. And Vladimiro Belli, Phil, coming in just now, losing 2 minutes, but what a great ride by him today.
Very good indeed to lead for so long and then only lose 2 minutes to the big climbers. Here comes a Pelazzotti. I think the face tells you he's not had a good climb at all. Down there somewhere is the man who has done well today, but I think they're talking there to Marco Pantani, which will be a very interesting story to be told.
I think he'll have a lot to say about his performance today, Phil.
There's a lot of people going to be so happy for him. There he is, welcomed again, former winner of the Tour de France and the Tour of Italy, and he's just won about the stage races in the Tour de France and Italy at the top of all of the famous hills. He has been in the past the stage winner, but not today on our first visit to the Zoncolan, because Gilberto Simoni keeps his record book clean here, because he's won both mountain stage finishes so far in this race, and there's still 3 more to come, plus the time trials. He still needs more time. Don't imagine for one moment he's won this Giro yet. We'll take a break, come back, and we'll bring you right up to date. And welcome back. We're looking down at a rather empty finishing line here on top of the Zoncolan. Let me say straight away, I misled you there when I said Simoni won both mountaintop finishes. He was beaten in the sprint on the Terminillo, of course, by Garzelli, but he got his revenge today. Simoni winning the stage by 34 seconds over Garzelli, and Francesco Casagrande coming home 3rd ahead of Popovic and Marco Pantani. So riders are still coming in here. The overall situation, by the way, no, this is the stage result here. 34 seconds for Garzelli, 39 to Casagrande, Popovic 42, and Pantani in the end coming in 5th place, just caught just before the line by Casagrande and Popovic. But overall now, I can tell you that Stefano Garzelli is now leading this race by just 44 seconds, so it's still extremely close. Pantani getting closer, but Noe did well at the end. He's kept his 3rd place, Paul.
He did ride very well towards the end there, but that's the thing about a climb which is so steep and so severe. Once you get into the steep part of the climb, all you can do is do your very best to get up it. And actually, between the guys who came in behind Gilberto Simoni, there wasn't really that big a time difference. 1 or 2 big names losing out, like Pavel Tonkov.
Good recovery by Pelazzotti, because he has kept his finishing position. Well, not completely. He's lost a little bit of time. He's still a top 6 rider.
Yeah, Pelazzotti put in a good ride. We didn't see him in the front group, but he must have clawed his way back in, much how Frigo did, initially being dropped, but not giving up, regaining the rhythm in the body and going all the way down to the line hard as possible. Here's the podium. Simoni in his Saeco jersey. He'll be getting that traded over for a pink jersey in a moment. No question about that. Last time, the first time in this race, when he put it on, it was just on the limit with Garzelli, only 2 seconds. That increase has gone up to, with the time bonus, it'll be 44 seconds now. Casagrande 3rd on the stage, almost 40 seconds behind. I think that Simoni will be pleased with this, not overly pleased, because Garzelli, a better time trialist, stayed quite close in the final analysis on the top of the climb.
Plenty of inspiration on the podium there to be first up the mountain, I think. Gilberto Simoni getting the victory today, increasing his lead in the Giro. Tomorrow, it's an undulating day. It's the last day in the race for the sprinter Robbie McHugh, and that's what he says. So he'll try to go home with a win tomorrow when we get down to Marostica. It's the next day we go back in the mountains, and the day after that we have the time trial. But tomorrow, come and join us. Stage 13, lucky for some. As we go down to Marostica, we'll be live with you as always, 9:30, and our primetime show coming to you at 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific time. And as always, our full information, little stories from Bob, myself and Paul coming to you on our website. The address for that, olntv.com, so come and see us there. Well, the return of Il Parato today. Wait for the morning papers all over Italy. He'll probably get nearly as much publicity as Gilberto Simoni. Out has gone the sprinters. Cipollini is now back home, very stiff indeed, as is Isaac Galvez. This is turning out to be quite a battle, and it really has yet to begin, because in the last week we have plenty of more mountains, and there are still 3 mountain top finishes to come in this race, plus 2 long time trials totaling 50 miles in all. The first time trial coming in 3 days' time, and that, I think, is where Garzelli will try to fight back and recover the 44 seconds he is currently behind in the overall lead of this race. Hope you're enjoying the coverage. I know Bob Roll is, and Paul Sherwen, and so am I. So, on behalf of the 3 of us, goodbye for now. We'll see you tomorrow at 9:30.
That's not quite so dominant, well then we get a lot of bumping arriving at the front end of the peloton, and I think we could be in for a rather dangerous sprint finish towards the end, Phil.
Well, all the finishes seem to be exciting this year in the Giro d'Italia. That's a little view of the transponder on the bicycles. That trips the timing system as they cross the finishing line. The only problem is when a rider comes in on somebody else's bike, then we have a little bit of a problem. But right now, no problems. We're all enjoying the sun as we race towards Marostica. We'll take our first break. When we come back, about 54 kilometres to go to the finish. The 86th Giro d'Italia is brought to you by Kawasaki. Let the good... It's only on one occasion counts for points in that King of the Mountains competition. Still being led, by the way, by Freddy Gonzalez, even though he hasn't been in at the sharp end when it comes to finishing on top of the mountain at the 2 summit finishes. He's scoring early on. Now, in theory, this should be a day for the sprinters. We're creeping closer to the time trial. That's in a couple of days' time. And tomorrow we have another mountain stage. And that is why Robbie McEwen has said, Bob, that he'll go home after today's stage. He doesn't see much left for him in the race.
Well, the mountains in the last week of this Giro d'Italia will take a lot of the speed out of his legs, I think, because they are so brutal. And Robbie McEwen doesn't want to sacrifice his Tour de France chances. He had a brilliant tour last year after doing the very same thing here in the Giro d'Italia, coming up with a couple of stage wins and then going home from the race early. There's no question that he could finish this race, but I think for his season overall and for his results and the maximum value that he can provide as a rider, he does does need to win some tour stages for the sponsor as well. So he's going to quit this race after today, perhaps tomorrow, and then we'll see how he goes in the Tour de France, but I'm sure we'll see him up there in those sprints as well.
Right, now an interesting fact, Paul, is the average speed of the race, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in fact, if we look at the record for the fastest Giro d'Italia on average, it was 38.937 kilometers an hour, and that is 24.19 miles per hour. We're actually not too far outside of that, not looking down at the riders at the moment who are just cruising along, but 38.8 is the average speed of the Giro d'Italia so far this year, and I think we've got a very good chance of catching that. And the difference between the two, Phil, is only 0.04 of a mile per hour, so
That's amazing.
it really is not very much at all, considering all of the mountains we've been over so far. And yesterday, for example, the average speed on the Zoncolan by Gilberto Simoni was just 19 kilometers an hour, which is about 11 miles an hour.
That is amazing, but even that is fast up a mountain like that. That is incredible. I'd have struggled up at approximately 3 miles an hour. They flew up it yesterday, but in the first 3 hours of flatter road yesterday, they were in excess of 26 miles an hour for the first 3 hours, and obviously when the mountains came at the end, they slowed down. Another little trip to the beautiful townships here in Friuli. The riders not in angry mood at the moment, just riding out the lactic acid of those long races, long mountain climbs yesterday. On the front here, we've got one of the riders from the Lotto team. This is Kevin Van Impe setting the pace from Belgium on the Lotto team. And he'll get a lot of help too from the other sprinters' teammates here.
Friuli is a beautiful part of Italy, and I can recall a race there one time where there was a slight, it's a beautiful day today in Friuli, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a little bit on the warm side, very light wind, clear skies obviously. It's going to be a great day of racing, and it'll be nice, like you said, to spin out the lactic acid in the initial parts of this stage from a brutal mountain stage yesterday. In the Tour of Friuli one year, there was a slight earthquake underneath the race, and the whole 200 guys in the race all looked down at their tires simultaneously. Everyone thought they had a flat tire. It was the oddest thing that I've ever seen in a bike race. The whole peloton looking down and seeing that they didn't have a flat tire. No one knew exactly what it was, but we kept racing anyways.
That's something I still laugh about, Bob, is when you go out riding with cyclists now with their mobile phones in their back pockets, and somebody's phone goes off and you see all the riders reach for those back pockets wondering whose phone's ringing and thinking it's theirs. It's still a moment of humour at least. Well, there's the peloton, though, doing what they call bit and bit, or one-on-one. They're sharing the pace of the race today. Nobody yet in angry mood. There was a sprint, by the way, the Inter-Giro situation, which came very early on today after 25 kilometres. And the race leader in the competition, there it is, Moreno Di Biasi. He got over there first this time. He hasn't been across the line first for a few days, but he's increased his lead in this competition now. Jan Zverada, not really a challenger, in second, but the big challenger, Bagstedt, was in third place. He stays second, Magnus Bagstedt, but he's lost a little bit of ground, of course. But that's becoming a two-race battle, I think, between Di Biasi and Bagstedt.
Well, Phil, in the early part of the race, actually after about 11 kilometres, the riders actually stopped for a minute. So they had a minute's silence to Denny Zanetti, a professional rider who was on the Fassa Bortolo team. He actually passed away during the winter on a visit to the dentist. And a lot of riders found him as being a very popular bike rider, and certainly I think has been missed this year by the Fassa Bortolo team. So the riders remembering him out on the course as they went through his hometown this morning.
Yes, indeed, and poor old Dennis had a reaction to the anaesthetic when he had a tooth taken out, and he passed away, and that really is so sad. Anyway, we're looking down on the pink jersey of Gilberto Simoni. There he is, happy with the thought that today isn't too hilly, and he'll wait to attack probably until tomorrow as he continues towards the finish line. We'll take a break. Well, here we are, the peloton, very much together today as they race towards Marostica and the finishing circuits here. And the riders, really, this is the first day. We won't call it a day off, Bob, because that would be very unfair, but this is the first day there's been a sort of tranquilness about the field. Yeah,
a piano section finally thrown into the race. The very high average speed when you consider the mountains and hills the riders have gone over so far in the Giro d'Italia, almost 40 kilometers an hour average. That's absolutely phenomenal. So today a bit of a respite. Tomorrow was a huge mountain also to Alpe di Pompeiano, and yesterday a huge climb to Monte Zoncolan. So the riders enjoying the sun and the warm temperatures and just doing light turns at the front, both the Lotto and the Tenax and the Fassa Bortolo teams. But brutal day yesterday. Simone saying that he wasn't on a great day. And one shudders to think what it's going to be like when he does have a good day and we go into the mountains. So that's a little bit fearsome for him to say something like that for the other climbers in his bike race. He wasn't on a great day, and he was still able to pedal away with ease, it seemed like, from Garzelli, Casagrande, a rejuvenated Marco Pantani, and Jaroslav Popovic. So we're in some fireworks in the rest of the Giro in the mountains, especially when Simone starts to fire on all cylinders.
Well, interesting, as we charge into the town of Marostica, did you know it was the hometown of Giovanni Battaglin, Bob, the man who was a winner of the Giro d'Italia? What's a special little thing about Battaglin?
King of the mountain of the Tour de France?
No, he was the only Venetian ever to win the Giro d'Italia, and that was back in 1981.
Oh, absolutely amazed. I said it earlier on in the first week. Bob taught me something. Now Paul Sherwin's taught me something. I'm glad I came.
Another rider living in Marostica, a teammate of mine, Davis Finney, from the 7-Eleven days. So hello to Davis Finney and the riders coming to his town, his hometown now of Marostica, Italy. Marostica, they have a famous chess match, and Paul, I would question you as to what's special about the famous chess match of Marostica.
Oh, I'll tell you, it's because they use very large pawns which are set in the town outside. But in fact, it's the third time the race has been down to Marostica, and in fact it's been pretty much an all-Russian affair, because in 1994 it was our favourite sprinter, Jamaluddin Abdujaparov, who got himself the victory there. But in 96, in fact, Evgeny Berzin won an individual time trial. Maybe today the nationality at the top of the leaders' rostrum will be Italian, because there's still an overwhelming number of Italians in this bike race for the moment.
So it's the Lotto team, the team of Vini Calderola there in the yellow, because they've got Garzelli. Garzelli's not a bad bunch sprinter himself when he wants to be, and all trying to just keep this race at a nice steady tempo. Just seeing the riders on the front from Formaggi, Piave there. Those riders have lost their big aggressive rider, Aggiano. He went out yesterday, he abandoned on that mountain stage, so they're going to have to look for somebody else now, just concentrate, I suspect, on helping Di Biase win that Inter-Giro competition. Now it looks as though we're approaching the finishing line for the first time this time through. This is the town of Marostica. So it's very nice for the organisation when the field all come through together, because it means there's no stragglers as we go out onto a 10-kilometre circuit, some 6 miles around, and the crowd here enjoying absolutely wonderful weather. It's really changed for the better. After 2 days ago, we were in thunder and lightning and the blackest skies I can recall over the top of a bike race as we raced into town. But here they are all together. Now, Paul posed the question to Bob Roll. I wonder if Giovanni Lombardi will be the protected man now. What do you think, Bob, with the absence of Cipollini?
Well, Domino Vacanze is still a very strong team. The only rider on their team to be dropping out of the race, Mario Cipollini, because of that very hard crash he had just a couple of days ago when we finished that furious sprint won by Robbie McEwen. So Domino Vacanze still has a very fast train, and they're going to have to lead somebody out. So I wouldn't be surprised if with either Benatti or Lombardi. We'll see what they do now. They don't have a GC man, but they do still have some chances in the sprints.
Well, there's 3 laps to go right now, making a total of around about 48.5 kilometres to the finish, so that should be around about 1 hour and 10 minutes of racing. It is still, Phil, very important for Domino Vacanze to perform well in the Giro d'Italia, because in fact the race organiser of the Tour de France, Jean-Marie Leblanc, is coming down over the weekend, and he's having a meeting, and will be having a meeting this evening with the owners of Domino Vacanze about their non-selection for the Tour de France. So the team, despite the fact that Mario Cipollini is no longer involved, still have to perform and try and convince the Tour de France organisers to bring Cipollini's team into the event. And I'd love to see him there.
I think we all would, and there has been polls at different websites around the world, of course, and vast numbers coming out in favour of Cipollini riding the Tour, but then they're not the organiser of the Tour. And as the organiser of the Tour de France will tell you, he wants riders who go through to the finish and not pack their bags after a few days with a few bob in the pocket from winning stages. So we'll see what happens. There's still a chance that Cipollini could get in the Tour de France. We'll take another tight fit as the riders have arrived here in the town of Marostica. Now, Bob, you were telling us about the chess competition here, which is quite unusual. Take us through it. There's the board there.
There's the board. You can see it's quite large. So, Paul, you were partially right. The pawns are quite big. It's the Partita de Scacchi, twice a year here in Marosca. It's a beautiful festival, and they actually use humans for the chess pieces. And the two players stand on the towers of either side of the square, and they call out their moves. They do not have to actually take the people out. They are free to be taken away. And there's a bunch of cafes surrounding the chessboard, and then they can all continue the festivities. It's a beautiful festival, one of the nicest in Europe.
Well, I think I'd like to be a pawn, because then I'd be out pretty early and I'd be going to sit in the cafe.
I don't know about that, Phil. I've always thought you were a bit of a queen.
Thanks very much. Looking now at the riders in the field. They're all together. They've come into the town. Now we can expect the action to start, because we're now facing up to the last 30 kilometres or so on this finishing circuit, which does have a climb on it. Only once over the top does it count for the King of the Mountains, though. And again, it's only third category, which is the first three riders will score and nobody else. So it's not going to affect the destiny of that green leader's jersey, with Gert Stegmans is the man setting the pace on the front.
Phil, all kidding aside, everybody knows that you're the king, so rest assured.
Yeah, no, the king will stand up there all day, of course. He never falls over, the king. I'm not sure I want to be the king now.
Okay, checkmate.
Oh, there we go. Well, what beautiful scenery it is today in Italy. The hot air balloon is going to have a problem flying today, though, because there's hardly any wind at all. Very hot indeed, 90 degrees. This is when I like to ride a bike.
It certainly is absolutely superb weather conditions, but it will hot up a lot more when we get onto this climb, which the riders go over 3 times. And strangely enough, the organisation have made it a King of the Mountains on only the second ascension, and it will get a third category rating. And I'm sure Freddie Gonzalez will try and come out, but Bob, so close to the finish, it's going to be rather difficult for that little climber from Colombia to take advantage over what is going to be a fairly organised front end of the main field from the teams of the sprinters.
We'll get a chance to look at the climb a couple of times before they come back into the finish for the end of the bike race, and we can see just exactly how difficult it's going to be and whether or not it's going to break the race up. In last year's Giro, on the 12th stage, I believe it was to Chieti, Denny Lunghi, who is now on the Alessio team. Last year he rode for Dinardi. He exploded out of the pack, did a great attack from a little breakaway, when he was able to stay away, taking advantage of that hill. The peloton was charging to the finish, but he held them off for a great stage win. He made an improvement team-wise, I think, to a little bit bigger, more organized team of Alessio. These have some great results. He was attacking on the finish to Monte Catini Terme, and got a little bit of a gap before he was swept up, but he might be able to use the hill out on the course to a big advantage, that do a lone escape and stay away to the finish. We'll just have to see just how hard that hill is.
Well, here's some little information on the climb itself. Only up to 856 feet, 2.2 kilometres each time they come up it. As I say, only once counting for King of the Mountains. Average gradient just 4%.
Yeah,
so
but Phil, it is actually fairly steep at the bottom. The first kilometre is around about 9% in gradient, and that's the part where we are actually at as we look down from the helicopter here. I think it's a long call for a man to break away over the top and survive to the finish, because from the top of the climb on the last time, it's 9 kilometres of riding to get to the finishing line.
Now, it's not the King of the Mountains this time up, it's the next time up the King of the Mountains. It's probably the reason why we're not seeing the green jersey of Freddie Gonzalez bothering to get near the front. No points, just a chance to give a good recce of the situation. In the mauve jersey down there, that's Alessandro Patacchi. Had that magical opening week when he led in both the mauve jersey points competition and the pink jersey race leader competition. He was fastest on time as well as on points for the daily finishes. And now he's having to concentrate on finishing well. I'm sure he'll be in the thick of the action today at the finish.
It's funny how team tactics and logistics can change throughout the course of an event like the Giro d'Italia. We came to this bike race and it was Dario Frigo and Aitor Gonzalez from the Faso Bortolo team who were regarded as the top men, and they, for the moment, are wallowing a long way down in the overall classification. And when they look back at their Giro d'Italia, Bob, they're going to have to say a very big thank you to Alessandro Patacchi.
Yes, absolutely. One of the dark marks on the Faso Bortolo, there's an attack going off the front now. It looks like the Norwegian Arvidsson there, who won a stage earlier in the Giro, when Simone put in that huge attack to the finish on the rolling hills, and just to get the pink jersey for the first time in this Giro d'Italia. Kurt Asle Arvidsson, he was the world champion a few years ago in the under-23, and now he wears the jersey as champion of Norway. Here's a replay of his attack there. and that is a good move, and it's going to hot up now. We'll see if some people can join across there, and just how difficult this climb is and how close it is to the finish. But I think that Fossa Bortolo will stay organized on the front. Giancarlo Ferretti asking his riders to do a really good Giro this year, because that's the one time in the year that they didn't have great results.
I'll tell you one thing, for a 2.2 kilometre climb, it seems to be an awful lot longer than that. I think sometimes, Phil, the Italians tend to stretch the kilometres, because I would put this closer to 3 or 3.5 kilometres in length. A very good move by this man from Team Factor, who was world champion back in 1997 at the under-23 level, and that was in San Sebastian. This team, I would have to say, has been the revelation of the Giro d'Italia. They are one of the smaller teams on the international circuit, but they will have come out of this event with an awful lot of publicity.
Yes, and he's really got his tail high now, having had that stage win. And
somebody's gone down at the back. That was a Gerolsteiner rider.
Was it a Gerolsteiner rider? Well, he slipped his chain on the gears, and now you can see how this twists and turns towards the summit. This is quite a good climb, in fact. The peloton, no fast tempo riding on it. They've got their sight on Arvidsson. There's no prize at the top of the climb this time up. Arvidsson is looking for a move here to break away, and he's being chased. I would not expect to see him being chased by Constantino Zabala at the moment, but you never know.
We see how Bob noticed the Fossa Bortolo team on the front. They're not panicking at all. They're not trying to chase these lone attackers. They're keeping a steady tempo. They're keeping themselves organised on the front end of the main field, because Alessandro Patacchi is not a great climber. What he will try and do is stay near the front of the pack. He'll slide down 4, 5, maybe 10 places as they go over the summit, but his team are not the ones who are going to lift up the pacemaking, because they want the main field to stay together.
They want it to come nice and steady up the climb so Patacchi can stay in contact with the peloton. One thing is the peloton is getting quite a bit smaller now, down to 151 riders, so you have to do a pretty good ride to stay in contention. We're just near the top of the climb now, and Fossa Bortolo is on the front, still making tempo. But as the attacks come, the next 2 times up this climb, we'll just have to see if the sprinters can stay in contention with the stronger riders on the climbs. Here's the king of the mountains, and it looks like it's a Fossa Bortolo rider getting first and second, and maybe Arvidsson hang on for third there, but it looked like a Lamprey rider coming up for third.
So next time around, expect to see Gonzalez in his green jersey in the thick of it, because that'll be the points for the climb. 3, 2 and 1 on this third category climb. Kurt Arvidsson there. It looks as though one of Robin McEwen's teammates there, Gert Stegmans, who was setting a lot of pace earlier, has found that climb a little bit too hard for him. He should get back okay, and hopefully be able to help Robbie out, because you've got to keep him in the thick of the action over the climb. So too Patacchi, if they're going to be in for the kill later on. About 39 kilometres to go. Arvidsson back in the pack. We'll take a break. And welcome back as we rejoin the riders in the Giro d'Italia now, 38 kilometres from the finish, and we're looking at Francisco Villa, the Spanish rider on the Italian Lamprey squad. They're trying to break this field up and stop the sprinters having their moment down the finishing line. We're on the I don't know what circuit you say. We're on the first of 3 circuits. That's right. When we come down to the finishing line again, we should see 2 laps to go.
But I think the next time up the climb, it will be even more serious, the attacks that the riders will have, and obviously the final time up, the opportunists will try and take advantage of the final launch pad to try and get away from the sprinters on the front end of the main field. But as you can see, this circuit has proved to be a good racing circuit, Bob. Fortunately, not an urban circuit as some of the ones we've had in the past. And in fact, there was a little bit of a discussion yesterday morning before the start between some of the top riders and the race organisation, discussing about these urban circuits, which really, at the speed that bike racing finishes nowadays, is a very dangerous thing to put into a race.
Well, we'll have to see what the small parapet around the square of Marosica does to the peloton when they come charging through there. The first time through, no problem. Everyone came through safely, but that was very narrow, and that can cause big problems so close to the finish line. You can see the riders are racing out quite fast now. There's a really hard U-turn on the course just after the start-finish line as well, so hopefully everybody will get through safe and sound, and we'll have a rip-roaring finish to the end of this bike race. These roads seem quite reasonable and beautiful racing, and just a country lane here, but not too dangerous. And we'll see the Fossa Bortolo rider still on the front of the peloton, trying to set up another sprint for Alessandro Patacchi.
Well, at the back end of the main field there, Graham Brown, the orange jersey of the Panaria rider, was obviously not thinking too much about the sprint today. He was involved in a pretty nasty crash himself a couple of days ago and lost himself over 5.5 minutes in 1.5 kilometres. As we look now at the front end of the main field, it really is turning out to be rather an interesting circuit here, Phil.
Well, the whole field enjoying this wonderful day of weather. And as I say, Robin McEwen down there wants to make this one count if he can, because he's going home tonight. He's not staying for the big mountain stage tomorrow, nor indeed the time trial, which is 48 hours away. And that's a long time trial, the race of truth, as we always call it. And Bob, many people are saying, why is a guy coming to the race, like a multi-day stage race, where the object is to reach the finish and drop out halfway through, and announcing the fact before you even start?
Well, it's maybe not good for the morale of your teammates to do that, and maybe what you should do is play the cards a little bit closer to your chest and not announce your intentions to drop out of a Grand Tour so early on. But honestly, for Robbie McEwen to make the most out of his sponsorship dollars, to give Lotto 35 kilometers to the finish, his team Lotto, the maximum amount of publicity, he knows he has to go to the Tour de France in top condition. And if he puts himself through the mountains of the Giro d'Italia, it might take some of the speed out of his legs. That's one thing he and his team cannot afford to have happen. He needs to be very fresh, very fast, and win some tour stages, which assure the sponsorship will keep going and going. There's Dario Frigo on the front of the bike race, not having a great Giro so far this year when he had such high hopes at the beginning. Did a great spring this year. He had a lot of race wins, moved way up on the UCI rankings, but he's really struggled in the mountains. He made a little bit of a comeback to the front group on yesterday's stage, but for GC purposes, he's not very high up. It reminds me of how he rode the Tour de France last year. Was pretty lowly in the general classification, but came up with a beautiful stage win in the mountains. So Fossa Vortolo still on the front of the bike race, and Frigo now is seeming to be dedicated to the chances of Alessandro Patacchi so they can get some more stage wins. He does have the points jersey on, and I'm sure they'll want to defend that, and they've already had a brilliant Giro d'Italia.
A big drive off the front here all of a sudden, or are these? No, these riders are coming back to the race. These are the riders who are split off on the climb, taking advantage of the slight lull in the pace and racing back in small little groups through those team cars. Once you're into the tail of the convoy of following cars, and that rider there just had a flat tyre, so he's got fresh legs, and he's got some fast-moving bike riders, if he sorts his problem out, that is, to get back up to the break. You've got to do it all under your own effort, of course. These riders coming back into play again. So the field is still all together as we're heading round towards the finishing line again, and then we'll have 2 laps to go. And the next time up the mountain is a King of the Mountains climb, which means that the climbers themselves will start to show their anger a little bit, and these riders who are now rejoining the race may not get back. Now, have a look at this. Tell me what you think when we come back after the break. Who has the most stage wins in any Giro d'Italia? There's the 4 names to choose from. I bet I know which one you're going to say. Be careful, that's the captain. Come back. Well, this is our Captain Morgan trivia question. Who has the most stage wins in any Giro d'Italia? Binder, Merckx, Cipollini or Pantani? I bet you all said Mario Cipollini. Well, you are wrong. Alfredo Binder, 1927, won 12 stages of the race. Thanks to Captain Morgan, that one. Let's rejoin the action now, and this is a moment ago as the field raced through the finishing line at Marostica, and there's the big sign, 2 laps to go, 2 circuits still to come, and just under 30 kilometres still to race, about 29 to be exact. And everybody seems to have regrouped.
Well, they've regrouped. There's been a bit of chaos at the back with mechanical incidents, but everybody should reintegrate the main field before we start the climb again in about 5 or 6 minutes time. It's around about 4 kilometres from the finish line to the start of the climb, which was a lot more difficult than any of us anticipated. It's an interesting move to the front end of the main peloton because it's the Lampre squad there who are getting themselves organised. They've got a very good sprinter in their midst in the form of Jan Zvorada, and in fact Lampre made a very good move up the overall classification yesterday, moving Francesco Casagrande into 5th, Rumsaz into 6th. But I think more importantly, they've taken over the lead in the team classification, Bob.
Team competition, very competitive in the Grand Tours. It's a real honor to be the top team in any of the Giro, Tour or Vuelta races. Lampre moving up into the top of that classification because they had a really solid, consistent day with their athletes yesterday. Casagrande getting a good placing there on the stage, and Rumsaz riding quite well also. So the other teams, one solitary leader like Arcelli, Simoni and Pantani. The other Lampre team being able to get over them because of the number of riders they had in the front of the bike race. Also Vladimir Belli was up there. So a great day for Lampre, even though they didn't come up with the big goods, and that honor went to Gilberto Simoni. And here's that little tower that they're going to go through. Quite narrow, a lot narrower than the road. So as riders sprint out and fan out towards the finish of this bike race. Luckily, that's on the back side of the course. It is close to the bottom of the climb, but it's not close to the sprint. So hopefully everyone will get through there safe and sound. There has been some discussion in the ranks because these finishing circuits have been so dangerous, and they're going to go right through there, and hopefully we'll have no incidents along that. And I do remember on the Via Appia in the Giro d'Italia one year, we came through a tunnel like that. It hadn't been announced, and the road went from 4 lanes down to one little carriageway from the old days, and it created a tremendous amount of disaster in the pack with about 2 kilometers to go. A lot of riders losing big times. It was quite dangerous.
So there's the details of the leading team. They got their lead yesterday away from Seiko because Casagrande, Belli and Rumsas were all up there yesterday riding a very good stage indeed. The team time is calculated on the first 3 riders' total time to cross the line on each of the teams. Looking down then on the Giro, because they've all had to file out for those little archways, it makes a rough ride now to regroup from the back. That's why you try and stay in the front. But it looks as though the boys in pink and blue, the riders of Lampre, feel that they have the man to win the stage in Jan Zverade today.
Well, Jan Zverade has been pretty close to the front in most of the sprints so far. He's an excellent bunch sprinter, and the fact is that the head of state of sprinting, Mario Cipollini, has been taken away from the Giro d'Italia because of that dramatic crash just a couple of days ago. One team does need to take responsibility of setting the pacemaking. You can see Robbie McEwen's team sitting in arrears there, just keeping Robbie to the front end of the peloton. I don't think that the team of Robbie McEwen has the power to lead him out when it comes down to the ends, and he tends to take advantage of other teams doing all the pacemaking on the front. Marino De Biazzi there in wearing number 84, he also is a man who could cause the surprise today. But I think Bob was right earlier on. We do need to watch out for Giovanni Lombardi, who has had a very long and illustrious career. He was the Olympic points champion back in 1992 in Barcelona, and given the fact that Mario Cipollini is no longer here, Phil, I would say Lombardi will be looking to try and get himself a stage win as well.
But his team weakened, of course, so instead of leading out Cipollini, he's got to get somebody to lead him out, and they're a man down. Robin McEwen's team, I don't think, as Paul has said, is strong enough to bring him to the line either, so the strong teams are very important, and if you haven't got a strong team, you've got to poach the other riders' teammates and get in their slipstream in the lead out for the line. Well, this time it is a King of the Mountains up the climb, and there is the King of the Mountains leader, Freddy Gonzalez, the only rider to wear that green jersey since the race began. Overall, he's got that 14-point margin over Constantino Zabala. Simone himself, because of his great performances on the mountaintop finishes with a 1st and 2nd place, he is in 3rd place in that competition, and Garzelli also with a 1st and 2nd on those same finishes. He's in 4th place there. And Brisegin, who rode so well yesterday, he's brought himself into the picture in 5th place. Grushenko, by the way, has got 9 points. He's having his ups and downs today, Paul. He fell off, but he has rejoined the pack after a little bit of a chase.
It's funny, we always get these stages now and again in a race like the Giro d'Italia, piano stages as Bob calls them, and that's when a lot of accidents really do happen, isn't it, Bob? Because riders tend to be more relaxed than they should be, not paying attention, and you touch a wheel in front of you, and these crashes, you can see 5 or 10 bike riders go down, and it's the hard crashes rather than the fast ones that seem to do much more damage.
Yeah, you're not ready, you're not racing, you're not concentrated like you are when they're racing flat out. So that little moment, lack of inattention, you go right down and you can get seriously injured. Let's hope that Grushenko is not too badly hurt, and it was just a minor fall, not a big one. He's back in the bike race, trying to hang on. Right here in the front, the Selle Italia riders trying to help out Freddy Gonzalez a little bit to get some more points. He's proven to be a very explosive sprinter at the top of these little climbs, and that's why he has such a big lead. I don't think we'll see a big challenge come from Zavalla, but you never know. Freddy Gonzalez now slipping down a little bit further. We'll see if he can get back up into the front of the race and get a lead out from some of his teammates and get some points here. Last time up the hill, there was some attacking going on. We might see some more of that, and here come the Selle Italia Colombia riders now getting up to the front, and there's Freddy Gonzalez right there on the fence there. Now he's got a teammate with him, and he's being matched by Zavalla, so this will be a good little sprint. We'll see if it breaks up the peloton in the back. They've started right at the bottom of this climb. This is going to be a really hard sprint all the way up to the top of this climb, and it did. That's Iliano, his trusted teammate there, giving him the lead out for the King of the Mountain points. So this is proving to be a very exciting competition, and they put these in here, I think, Paul, just because it spices up the race a little bit, gives us something to talk about. It's very nice of them.
Well, that's a fine show of power there, and because it's the climbers themselves have gone, for the points at the top of the climb. Just look at this. The field here has backed off and allowed the two Colombian riders to go clear. Iliano leading out to the King of the Mountains leader, and Zabala missed the train there.
He certainly did miss the train. That is a very brave effort, and one or two riders have moved across that gap right now, but it's a long ride here for Iliano to try and drag Freddy Gonzalez forward. In fact, it looks as if it may well be one of the it's not one of the Kelme riders on the back.
Who's jumped onto the back there. So I don't think it's
Fortunato Balliani.
No, it's Balliani. Fortunato else, because a very good climber, also features well in the mountains competition. 25 kilometres from the end of the race there, as the King of the Mountains competitors tried to leave here from the pack. That's the 1 kilometre to go climb as well for the riders in the sprint. Fortunato Balliani. Paul and I have seen a lot of this rider, especially in the Tour de Langkawi, which is a race in Malaysia. Although they call it Langkawi, which is an island off the northwest corner of the peninsula, in fact it is a veritable tour of the states of Malaysia, the actual mainland peninsula. And Balliani always features there in that event in the mountains competition. So he is a good climber, and it looks like he might try to spoil the party here.
He might try and spoil the party, but these two riders also know him from the Tour of Malaysia, because the Colombia Cell Italia team have always been dominant down there in that Malaysian race. It comes early on in their season, and in fact this year they won the team competition in the Tour de Malaysia, and last year Dario Munoz was the winner overall. But you can see here on the front end of the main field though, Marco Pantani very attentive. He's got his men to the front end of the field, just making sure that these three riders who went from a long way from the summit to try and get themselves points here don't get too much of a lead. You can see the Vantaggio there, 6 seconds lead over the main field, but this is a long way to go, Phil, to try and get yourself just 3 more points in the King of the Mountains competition.
So we're heading up towards the summit, and there's the main field. They'll feel they've got this under control because they know that Gonzalez is going for the 3 points at the summit. Only 3 riders scoring, 3 are away, so the arch rival Zabala is not going to get any points now. So Gonzalez must increase his overall lead on his nearest rider. This is where it kicks in a bit, Bob. This is where it gets tough. And look at that. The pacemaking now by Iliano has been done to perfection. He's going to freewheel back to the race, more by demand than choice, I think. Now, is Balliani going to spoil the party for Gonzalez?
Well, he seems to be very serious about this King of the Mountain sprint. Freddy Gonzalez also has been doing the best there. Now he's being obliged to lead out. Iliano pulled off. He's already blown, so he'll go back into the field. And now Freddy Gonzalez is going to have to do the sprint basically by himself. We got a marker of 500 meters to go to the top of the climb, but it seems to be a lot further than that. And there's, you can see Iliano going back to the field. He's being swept up by Pantani's men who are in front of the peloton. And just ahead is the sprint for the King of the Mountain points. And it looks like Balliani's gone around him, but Freddy Gonzalez is coming back now. He's obliged him to come around, lead out the sprint, and it's going to be very close. That's quite a good one. And Freddy Gonzalez is not too happy about that. Balliani not factoring in at all to the King of the Mountain points up until now. So Freddy Gonzalez is wondering why he had to go quite so hard to get those points, even they're so small.
Well, I had a quick look down the overall classification there, Phil. In fact, those are the first points that Balliani has got. The main field under control of Mercatoniuni and Marco Pantani. And what I would expect to happen now is a small counterattack to come from Fortunato Balliani.
Good heavens, how dare you challenge the leader of the King of the Mountains on his domain? And not too happy, is he? He made him work for those points, little as they were. Gonzalez increases his lead. We'll take a break. And welcome back. 12 seconds. We saw the finger pointing by Freddy Gonzalez to Fortunato Balliani. Well, Balliani's decided to attack, and he's gone on by himself now. So I think we can have a look at the result of the King of the Mountains. It's been confirmed, and the 3rd place taken by Roberto Conti, a teammate indeed of Marco Pantani. But Gonzalez rather upset. Now, why is he upset, Bob? I mean, the guy's on a rival team.
Well, that's true. He didn't realize at this point that Balliani had a plan to go out on an attack here, and he thought he was just trying to take the points away from him for reasons he could not fathom, and there were no reasons Gonzalez getting that, except Balliani wanted to do a little breakaway, and it's been a very effective move. He's gone up the road. He has 12 seconds now. There's Robbie McEwen moving into the picture, trying to get up to the front. He's staying right in the front of the group. That's exactly what he needs to do to have a chance for the sprint, but they're going to have to start chasing Balliani here pretty soon. They're regrouping from the back. It's a really hard climb up to the finish, and Freddy Gonzalez getting maximum points there. there in front of Baliani. He was upset, I think, 20 Ks to go for Baliani. He's out on the circuit. He'll come back around. They'll have one more lap, and here's the peloton going through there. We'll see what the time gap is.
Well, the time gap, there's somebody just moving across there. It's not very much more than 15 seconds at the moment. The main field getting themselves organised, and this man, Fortunato Baliani, has been a professional for quite a long time, turned pro back in 1998. And in fact, one of his best performances was one that both Phil and I saw in the Tour de Langkawi in 2000, where he finished third overall. And he's only really got one small victory under his belt, and that was in a stage race in Colombia a couple of years ago.
Well, beautiful roads anyway, great surface, and here's the man trying to go for gold today, Fortunato Baliani. Remember, he's a member of the Formaggi Pinzola Piave team. Their leader, Leo Aggiano, packing in yesterday after being very prominent. We're an awful long way from where Aggiano comes from now, down in the far south of Italy where this race began. We've now moved right up to the north of the country. It's taken us almost 2 weeks to get there, but the stage finish today is in a town of Marostico, which is, as the crow flies, entirely due east of Milan, and it'll take us a long time to get to Milan because we don't finish there, of course, until a week on Sunday. There's the Marco Pantani's team, all men still in, and I think taking a lot of enthusiasm for the race now because of Pantani's fine riding.
Well, this is Michele Gobi from the Denardi Colpack team, just making the junction with Fortunato Baliani, but their advantage is still not very much on the front end of the main field, and the main field being controlled by that team of Marco Pantani. Now, Bob, to me, that really is quite a surprise. I can't understand exactly the tactics of Marco Pantani's team. We saw him riding at the front with his team in the first part of the race when he didn't really have a chance of winning a stage, and we thought it was a publicity stunt. He yesterday confirmed that he has returned to the form that he had many years ago as being one of the top climbers. On a flat stage like this, which is looking like going to be a sprinter stage, why is he riding?
Well, I think he wants to keep the good publicity going for his team that he's starting to show in the mountains by himself. And his team riders, I think they're all fired up because he is riding so well. And I tell you, the Italian public are going crazy that Pantani is back in the front. Then Mario Cipollini himself saying congratulations to Pantani for, after so long out of the pages from the front of the sport, to come back to it, to never surrender, never give up, and keep believing that he could one day return to the front of the bike race. He wasn't pedaling away from the fields as we've seen him do in the past, but he was right up there with Casagrande and Garzelli and Popovic throughout the climb. It's a fantastic result. So I think his teammates getting a little bit of morale for that. It makes it so much easier to do tempo on the front of the bike race when your team captain is on good form, and Marco Pantani seems to have returned to that. But tomorrow's stage is a real beast. It's an incredible stage. There's 3 huge mountains before the Alpe di Pompeago, where they finished the stage, which is another mountaintop finish. And then Sunday's time trial. So this weekend, a huge weekend of racing in the Giro d'Italia.
Well, there are huge climbs we go over tomorrow, Phil. The first one, the very famous climb of the Passo di Rolle, which is around about 2,000 metres. And then immediately after that, the Passo di Valese, and then the very famous climb of the Passo di San Pellegrino before the descent, and then that final ascent up to Alpe di Pampiaggio. And I'm sure that Gilberto Simoni once again will try and stamp his authority on this bike race. But I think he needs to watch out because the challenges to me seem to be improving as the days go by.
2 men in tandem trying to hold off the whole peloton here, and I'm not so sure they'll do it, of course, because they're not getting very far. As the sun is now high in the sky, they're only just dangling in front of the whole field today. We've still got one more circuit to come. Can these 2 stay away? We'll take a short break. Rejoin us very soon. Moments ago, the riders arrived back downtown in Marostica in the Giro d'Italia, and they'll hear the bell now for the final circuit as they go for one more climb of the hill. Now we're back with the live coverage here, and as we watch the pictures, clearly I can tell you that pictures for Italian viewers are in a bit of a problem, but ours are perfect today, Paul.
Keep your fingers crossed. We've had excellent pictures this afternoon, but in fact news coming from Italy that out there coverage has been a bit ropey this afternoon. We just saw a small group off the back end of the main field there, just riders who I think will just try and survive, and this is that group. 1 or 2 riders certainly caught out, I think, Bob, by the pressure, and looking through there you can see an awful lot of Lotto Domo riders, the teammates of Robbie McEwen, and as we said earlier, that team really doesn't seem to have the strength to provide the lead out for a man like Robbie McEwen when we come down to the end of a race like this.
Well, they've already lost a couple of d'Italia, and 3 have been dropped from the front group, so that doesn't leave McEwen with hardly any teammates left. Very hard tempo at the front of the bike race. Robbie McEwen himself has been able to stay right in the front. He is on good form. He'd love to win a stage. He's always been very opportunistic in these sprints, trying to fight for the wheel of Mario Cipollini. Now that Cipollini's not here, we'll have to see how the whole sprint unfolds. It'll be very interesting and very instructive for the rest of the Giro.
Baglioni and Gobi were swept up just before we came back there, and the field now all together with Pantani's team working very hard. I noticed Nick Gates, the other Australian from Lotto Paul, was off the back in that rear group.
Well, it's first time for him being on a real top team, and I think a first time for him in a major tour as well, so he's obviously having a hard time. Maybe psychologically hurt, Bob, by the fact that he knows his teammate and friend from Australia, the man who imposed him onto the Lotto Domo team during the winter months, will be departing at the end of today's stage and heading up to the slightly cooler climbs of Belgium.
We'll go back to Belgium, have some days off probably. It's been a very difficult Giro so far, not only for the climbers, but the poor sprinters at the end of the bike race, just trying to make the time limit on those huge mountain climbs. Robbie McEwen have a chance to recover a little bit, do some smaller races, get fit for the tour, and start fighting out those sprints with, perhaps, or with not, Cipollini in the Tour de France. There's still some discussion that his team might get in there, but now that he's out of the Giro, we'll have to see just exactly how the Société Tour de France calls that last spot.
Well, in fact, Jean-Marie Leblanc in town this evening, as we said earlier, and after a dinner appointment which he's got with the Elite Company, he will then be going out to meet with the owners of the Domino Vacanze team, and I wonder what sort of discussions will go on there. The funny thing is,
his crash helmet.
I hope he does take his crash helmet. But the funny thing is that they're saying that they can't bring an extra team into the Tour de France because they don't have enough hotels. And Domino Vacanze is a holiday company, and they reckon they can get hotels anywhere in the world if he needs them.
Wow. Well, we'll see what happens. There's still one chance there for Cipollini, I think, because they're still waiting to confirm one team in that race. Now, as we look down on the whole peloton here, it's going to be a tough race to organise the finish, and that's going to make it much more interesting for us, because remember, gone now the demon sprinter Mario Cipollini, and going with him was the sprinter on the Spanish Kelme team, Isaac Galvez. He went out in the same crash. Angelo Furlan was involved in that crash, and surely is still feeling a bit stiff from it. Robbie McEwen won. He doesn't seem to mind when it rains heavy. He can handle his bike better than most. So we could also see the return of Jan Zverada, and of course Giovanni Lombardi, who can now race for himself in the absence of the Lion King Cipollini. So it could be quite an interesting finish today. There's Pantani, grimacing just like he was yesterday. Yesterday, of course, he was climbing the Zoncolan, and he was unlucky not to finish in third place. He was passed almost in sight of the line by 2 riders. That was a great shame.
Well, Lombardi has won stages in the Giro before, and he got that one last year, remember, Bob, in a torrential downpour when he got away in a small group on a descent as we charged into town. And I think today he will look to try and get himself the victory, because a lot of the sprinters who can cause a bit of aggravation over the final kilometres will disappear, I think, on this final climb. But the climb doesn't seem to be that hard to get rid of a man like Robbie McEwen, who is in absolutely superb form with 2 stage wins under his belt. And if he hadn't been a rough riding Aussie, well, then it could certainly have been a 3rd win, because he was relegated after a little manoeuvre, Phil, in the last 200 metres against Fabio Baldato.
Well, this is the whole pack, and they've really got the backs into the race now as we course through the valley, shortly to climb up the Salita de la Resina for the last time. That's only just ahead of them now, and I think that's where we will see attacks which may or may not decide the race, because the sprinters will fight to keep this race together as the riders at the back slowly but surely regroup after the last patch. We'll take a quick break, come back for all of the action. And welcome back, and as you rejoin us, we're on the climb, and Stefano Garzelli is the rider just ahead. An immediate reaction coming from Gilberto Simoni, because they're split on the race by just 44 seconds. If Garzelli was to win, of course, he'd get a 20 seconds time bonus. We didn't expect an attack here.
Very cheeky move by this man, Stefano Garzelli, but look who has responded immediately. Very attentive. The man who won the bike race yesterday, Gilberto Simoni, the overall leader after 12 stages, and he was probably riding fairly close to the front, expecting something like this. And there is Marco Pantani as well. Pantani really is riding a superb Giro d'Italia. We're still a fair way from the summit of this climb, but I think that certainly, Bob, will have put the cat amongst the pigeons.
Incredible attack by Garzelli. Garzelli's throwing all kinds of chaos into the front of the peloton here. Everyone trying to get back on terms now. It's a big attack. Frigo trying to come back across with Popovic. Very hard stage. This is a difficult climb. We'll see if Fossa Bortolo from behind these guys can reorganize the chase for their man Pataki. They do have a long way to the finish to go. Simoni right on the wheel of Garzelli. Now we can see perhaps why the guys from the Mercatoni Uno team were doing a bit of tempo there, trying to keep the pace high. Right when they shut down a little bit, boom! Garzelli went, Simoni right on his wheel, and Pantani following that. And the Fossa guys are trying to regain control of the peloton now.
Scarponi also straight up there too, another man who's keeping a very high position on the overall, and we hardly notice him. But the leaders have all come together in the overall classification, and you've seen the gap which is now formed behind as Pantani starts to work.
Pantani winding it up to go over the top of this climb in first position. Here's the counter move coming here from Dario Frigo. I think he may well look for the first couple of corners to try and open up an advantage. But look at this, we have got a gap on the stage when we expected it to be a day for the sprinters. The climbers have used this small 2.5 kilometre ascent, Bob, to cause absolute chaos.
Well, Simoni right on the wheel of Garzelli there. He won't want to do any work at all. He wants things to regroup and put a little bit of order back in the peloton. But right now, it's a very difficult moment in the bike race. A hard climb coming into Marustica. Garzelli really igniting the race, and Pantani countering that, going over the top of the climb first. And it looks like Frigo's now gone off the front by himself.
13 men coming together on the climb. Pantani's taken them over the mountain, but now Dario Frigo is having a little dig. I think the move will be foiled because the majority of the overall leaders got themselves into this move. That's the situation this morning, remember, 44 seconds, the gap to Garzelli, 2:23 to Noe, right down to the top 6 there. And it was the attack coming from Garzelli, looking for those few seconds. Very, very vigilant, though, the race leader. And because they've come together, I fear they will nullify the move. Dario Frigo may be the opportunist to win.
It could be, and as they say in the world of cycling, he really is a strong boy. He's 17th overall at the start of the day. He's almost 10 minutes behind, but the gear he was using to try and open up that gap was absolutely phenomenal. There is still a split off the front end of the main peloton. All of the main names have managed to make that split for the moment, but I don't think the sprinters expected this to happen at all. And men like Robbie McEwen will be gasping for breath right now, and they'll probably, Bob, be throwing out the sandbags.
Well, Dario Frigo, a fantastic time trialist. He won this year's time trial in Paris-Nice at a phenomenal rate of speed. He's out in the front by himself. That's where he loves to be. It isn't a descent where the riders behind can get organized and they have a little bit more power than a lone breakaway. But if any man can break away from the field in this finishing circuit, it's this man in front of the bike race right now, Dario Frigo, and have a chance to stay away.
Well, it was 9 kilometres from the summit of that climb to the finish line. We're about 7 kilometres to go right now. And Dario Frigo, unfortunately, has never really been one of the great descenders. He did not look very comfortable going around that corner at all. And it's because of that lack of his... In fact, somebody's gone, hey, looks like Garzelli. No, it's a 10X rider's gone down there, taking a few risks. And in fact, it could be Pozzi, who crashed a few days ago. And this is the remnants of the main field trying to come back. Someone else has gone down there as well from Seiko.
Well, it's not the race leader, that's for sure, but it was a man who was up in that leading group. As here, we might be able to see it here. And the Seiko rider was unlucky there, unsighted and thrown under the barriers. And 3 of them going down. It looks like it might be a Lamprey rider down there as well. I didn't catch either who was that, but that was a very ugly looking fall for those 3 riders at a most inopportune moment, because this breakaway might be succeeding here. Meanwhile, Frigo has now been joined by a rider. I think it's Gerolsteiner, but we'll wait and see who it is. But there are 2 riders in front now. Frigo has got help here. He won't know about the shunt behind either, because these 2 riders are going for gold together now. Let's have a look. This is number 98 up here. And
Tocznik.
Tocznik. Now, Georg Tocznik was high up in the overall classification, lost a little bit of ground yesterday, tried to claim a bit back today.
Well, they're on the flatter part of the course right now. Not too many dangerous corners for Dario Frigo to slow down on. He can actually use his huge power as we get onto the straighter part of this finishing circuit here. We're now looking at the banner, which will indicate to these riders 5 kilometres to go to the finish. We've got 2 leaders, Frigo and Tocznik. Tocznik not waiting at all on the slipstream of Frigo, coming immediately to the front, but that was absolute chaos. That crash, Bob, may well tip the scales to the advantage of the attackers, because swamping across the road like that indicates that that group behind has lost its impetus.
Yes, absolutely. Simone watching Garzelli. Garzelli was the one who started the breakaway. All Simone has to do is match him. He got back on the wheel almost immediately. There's a 7 seconds advantage. Now, anybody else, we would say they would get caught. But these two riders who are riding so well on GC, especially Dario Frigo, a fabulous, powerful rider. He's come back on form today after some hard riding through the mountains, and he's trying to stretch his little advantage out. Georg Tochnig, almost impossible for him to come through, and everybody is riding. He's in 7th, Tochnig is. He's doing a great Giro d'Italia. Frigo a little bit further down, but still in the top 20 himself. He'd love to put in a huge effort here and make up for the lost time on the Terminillo with a great stage win, and he's gone out. He realized his chance was today after Garzelli attacked and opened up a gap. He went from there forward in a huge gear, gigantic gear coming off the mountain. Not a great descender. I think that's how Tochnig caught up, but now Tochnig is contributing to the break there, and if they stay away, he'll get a little bit of time on GC, but this is a huge effort being put in by Dario Frigo.
There's not much organisation on the front end of the main field. In fact, the man who seemed to be doing the bull's share of the work was Francesco Casagrande. But now you can see Simone's getting his men around him, getting himself organised. A good move here once again coming from, it looks like Gaspare trying to get off the front. He was on the attack yesterday, pretty high in the overall classification, taking that corner nice and smoothly. You see how he clipped the apex of the corner so as not to lose any of his impetus at all. And in fact, that acceleration has put him halfway across the gap to the two leaders.
Well, both of these riders are extremely good lone riders against the watch. Tochnig, the current time trial champion of Germany, has been in fact for the last couple of years, and Frigo once won the time trial stage of the Giro d'Italia a couple of years ago. So these are riders who could score in 48 hours time in the individual event, but more importantly, with that pure speed, they have the ability to hold off, and there's somebody else coming to give them strength as well. This looks as though it's a Denardi rider. Gaspare is coming across to join them.
Well, Gaspare, that's a great move. He's having a hard time to get across. He made it halfway across in the corner itself, and now he's going to make the juncture there. He'll want to take a breath now and sit on. In the back of the field, of course, Fossa Bortolo doing absolutely no work. They're not going to lead out Pataki, which would be the normal protocol until this breakaway gets caught. So it'll be up to the Saeco riders, and it looks like a Mercatoni Uno rider coming through. They'll just want to defend the position of their men. Mario Cipollini not in the bike race. We would know one thing for sure. If Cipollini was here, Domina Vacanze would be at the front of the bike race doing huge tempo, and it looks like Fossa Bortolo is going to start the chase now. That's kind of an odd maneuver.
I think they were just getting on the front to set a false tempo. They don't want to chase it down unless, of course, Alessandro Pataki has managed to come back to this group. And we haven't seen him for the moment. He may well have made a daredevil descent and reintegrated. In fact, he probably has, because if you look at the way Dario Frigo is riding here now, Bob, I would say he's got information that his teammate and the fastest sprinter in the bike race nowadays, Pataki, has made the junction.
Now, this is one very good example of why the earpieces play such a big role in international cycling. In the old days, he would not know that Frigo would not know that Pataki had already caught back up into the group, and he would continue his effort. He wouldn't know that his team was doing the chase and starting to set up the sprint for Pataki. He gets the information from Ferretti, his team director, and he shut it down. And here comes the attack by Gaspare from Denardi. Let's see if Frigo can counter it now.
Well, we're looking at a man who's only won 2 bike races in his life. He turned professional in 2001. Graziano Gaspare. He was the under-23 European champion in 2000, and that prompted him to sign professional forms. He's racing for what would be the biggest success of his life. Frigo has turned the gas off, the peloton has come back, it's regrouped, and we just have that one rider dangling in front.
Well, now it's going to be the team of Alessandro Pataki to get themselves organised, and it's a brilliant ride by Pataki to be in a group like this. Gaspare is back in the fold for the moment, and it's the white and blue train of Fossa Bortolo on the front end of the main field. They'll pick up the pace-making right now. Frigo looking down the line to see just exactly where his teammate is, and it looks to me very much like Lombardi has made it into this group as well.
Yep. There he is in third wheel, first man in our picture, and there's the camera going in just for you to see him. And the pink jersey of Alessandro Pataki. 3 stage wins in the first 6 days of this race. At 1 kilometre to go, the sprinters have brought this back together, and that is absolutely surprising. I think Bob Roll was right. The radios have given the game away and caused Frigo to turn off the chance of a win in favour of his team leader in the pink jersey at the bottom of our picture. He's checking over his shoulder, is Alessandro Petacchi, to see who's creeping up on his back wheel. And then if it's the right men, he'll go. But right now he's looking for his team to lead him out one by one and see if they can deliver him back to the line. No sign yet of Robin McHugh, but watch out for Danger Man. Third wheel at the moment. Giovanni Lombardi looking for the win in the absence of Cipollini. Now he's going through on the left of our picture here. They split for the line. This is going to be, and possibly Benatti is in there as well. But now it's up to him. Here comes Petacchi on the right, and Lombardi trying to hold on, but I think Petacchi's got this one red right as Alessandro Petacchi moved across the road. I don't think he impeded anybody. Alessandro Petacchi gets his 4th stage win of the Giro d'Italia. There's no doubt he moved off his line, but I don't think he impeded anybody on the run-in. We'll see what the judges think about that. When we come back after the break, we'll bring you a little bit of a replay of that, and we'll look at the prize winners of the day. Don't go away. Welcome back. Alessandro Petacchi moments ago taking his 10th win of the season and his 4th stage win in the Giro d'Italia. And there's the result. Yeah, that's the GC we're looking at the moment. Simoni loses a little bit because Stefano Garzelli got 3rd place and a bonus, which means he's not 44 seconds behind now. The small time bonus moves him up now to just 36 seconds behind. There's the human chess set down there, by the way, in this lovely town of Marostica. And as they wait now for the prize presentations, I'm afraid that time is going to run out for us this morning. But we'll look now at Petacchi there. There's the stage results. Daniel Benatti of Dominia Vacanzi getting 2nd. Garzelli, a very valuable 3rd place. And Bonucci and Mazzolini taking 4th and 5th. Different sprinters on the block now in the absence of some of the fast boys. Well, tomorrow it's from the flat roads back into the mountains. A really tough day in the high passes again tomorrow. And so we can expect to see the contenders for final victory coming back in the action as we now go into the Italian Alps, and Pampiaggio is where the race will finish. It's going to be a very hard day of racing, especially so because it's on the eve of the first big time trial, which is rather late in the Tour this year. Over those 3 peaks, and they really are tough ones, and the riders know now they've got to again come out and fight. And Garzelli struck a good blow today, closing in a few seconds before they start off. There's the big one they'll worry about, the Passo di San Pellegrino. Takes its name after some very famous water you can buy around the shops. And Pampiaggio also really steep. It's a big haul tomorrow, a very important day, but then they all are in the Tour of Italy. So we'll be with you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, we're on the weekend, Memorial Day weekend in the United States, Marostica to Alpe di Pampiaggio, and that will come to you at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, we're looking down at the Tour of Italy as it continues on its journey around Italy. Happier days here for Mario Cipollini, no longer in the race. The winner today, Alessandro Petacchi. He's had 4 wins so far, increases his lead in the points competition. Don't forget, come and visit us on our website for all of the information, and that is olntv.com, and enjoy the tour with us. We're enjoying it with you, and on behalf of Bob Roll, Paul Sherwen, and me, Phil Liggett, we'll see you tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back in the mountains. Goodbye. Of the CC Polsat team from Poland, Sergei Adyev of the Lambau Credit team. They've been out to nearly 3.5 minutes, Paul, but they're being wound in, and then we'll settle down for the Inter-Giro sprint, I guess.
Well, they're resisting pretty well at the moment. They did have that maximum advantage of 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It's now hovering at the 30-second mark, but this is what's happening at the back at the moment, or I should say just a few moments ago. Julio Perez, the climber from the Panaria team, he seems to be in all sorts of difficulties today. He's been at the back of the main field. I think what we're looking at here is probably some kind of tendinitis problem. I would explain that, Bob, by the fact that this man uses absolutely monstrous gears in the mountains.
He uses a huge gear in the mountains, and it looks like it's starting to take some toll on the behind his knee there, and you can see the toll that the time trial took to Alessandro Petacchi. At the sign-on this morning, Petacchi, no smiles at all, even though he's in the purple Ciclamino jersey. Looks very similar to the pink jersey, but it's actually the points leader's jersey, and he got torn to shreds in the time trial when he crashed on the descent of the only climb out on the course, and he's in an awful lot of pain. Julio Perez, it seems like he has a little bit of knee pain. It might be some swelling behind the knee there, so he'll have to be very careful about that. There's still a few more days in the mountains where he could win a stage, but for the time being, he's going back to the doctor's car quite a bit, and the lead now of the breakaway is down to 25 seconds as they get closer to the Inter-Giro sprint.
They're going to shut it down now because yesterday Magnus Bagstedt achieved one of the ambitions of the Danish Factor team, and that was to get the lead after nearly 10 days of trying. He finally got it yesterday in the time trial, taking the sky blue jersey in that competition away from Moreno Di Biase, at least for the time being. It's still a competition, and I have to say I haven't a clue how it works. It is so complicated.
Well, after 10 days of trying to understand, Phil, I think I've got a brief understanding of how that Ciclamine, the blue jersey competition works. On every individual stage, it works on a time bonus system, and the first man to cross the line gets a 30-second time bonus taken off his time for reaching that point. There are no actual time differences in the riders at that finishing point, except on the time trial stage. And because of that fantastic performance yesterday by Magnus Bagstedt, he was able to revert his position from second to first, and he now leads that competition by 28 seconds. It really is quite a good advantage for him now, because it's going to be a very close battle between Bagstedt and Di Biase over the next few flat stages. Jans Verrada riding consistently in that competition. Phil, he's a minute 44 back, but if you look at the gaps are really starting to open. It is like the pink jersey race starting to become a two-horse event.
And with another time trial to come, one presumes Bagstedt will score heavily again over Di Biase. You understood all that, didn't you, Bob?
Well, yes, I have a general knowledge. I remember when they introduced this competition to the Giro d'Italia, even the riders themselves had no idea who was leading it, and they seemed to give the jersey out at random throughout the stages. And even we were mystified by the rules of the judges there. And when it first came in, the riders hadn't had time to start to understand all the rules and everything, but they give a lot of publicity to the Inter-Giro competition, and that's why we've seen it be so incredibly competitive between Bagstedt and Di Biase. And I assure you, Di Biase's team, the Formaggio Pinzolo team, is going to be at the front of the bike race, leading him out for the sprint. He might have a little bit more speed than Magnus Bagstedt, but Bagstedt's been sprinting quite well also himself, so it's going to be a really, really fast and tough competition for that jersey.
Well, Phil, one of the first winners in that competition in the second year it was run was actually the Australian Phil Anderson. He realised very early on how important it was, and before it was the Azzurri competition, the Inter-Giro, it used to be the hotspot sprint competition. And around about 1985, I think, Eric Heiden was the winner of that competition. I think you were there, Bob.
I was there, and we were leading out Eric throughout the Giro to try to win that, and Danny Gissiger, a very strong Swiss rider on the Attila team of Urs Freuler, was Eric Heiden's main competitor for that, and it was a real war between our team and their team, and Eric wound up winning that, and that was quite really a nice competition for Eric Heiden to win, and it was an honor to lead him out for all of those sprints. We had a good time doing that.
Didn't Gissinger win the stage at Pavia that time?
In fact, he did. It was in '81, I think, that Daniel Gissinger got a stage victory here, and that was only the second time that it had been here. And going back a few years before that, it was Olli Ritter. Look on the right-hand side there, you can see the damage of the crash that Alessandro Patacchi had yesterday in the time trial. Now, I find it very difficult to understand how a man who is fairly well down in the overall classification should take major risks like that, and he risked the fact of not being able to continue the Giro d'Italia. He actually finished last on the individual time trial stage yesterday, losing himself for almost 12 minutes in the time trial, and Bob, as you can see, he was in an awful lot of pain.
Well, it looks like he got to those very rough cobbles on the descent of that climb, maybe took a few too many risks, went down hard. He had to be bandaged up for quite a while. That's after the finish there, getting into the ambulance. And you can see all the bandages, both knees, elbows, his back. We saw Tyler Hamilton go through a similar situation in last year's Giro. Soldier on, finish second, win the time trial. So it's possible for Patacchi to keep on racing. The advantage now to the break down to 18 seconds. But Patacchi will be very sore for the next few days trying to contest these sprints. And
There's
here it is, the junction right now.
Wojciech Chmielewski and Sergei Adviev, they've been away since 58 kilometres, back in the bag at 47 kilometres from the finish. And at 34 kilometres from the finish today, we have the Inter-Giro sprint we've tried to explain to you in these last few minutes. And there's no holding the peloton today. Here's one of the hard-working media taking our photograph as he makes his way towards the finishing line today. They're about 47, 46 kilometres from the finish at the moment. They're 164, the new leader in the Inter-Giro competition. And that's what we're concentrating on for the next 15 kilometres or so as they approach the town of Lodi, because that's where the sprint is today, Bob. And it looks as though Factor aren't waiting for the sprint.
They've sent a man up the road perhaps to get the #1 sprint bonus, which will be 30 seconds, which would give Di Biase as long as Bagstead did not get any time at all. He didn't get a place in the sprint. If Frank Hoy can stay off the front, he will get the 30-second bonus, and then all that DiBiase will be eligible for is for the second place on the sprint, which is 24 seconds. He needs 28 seconds to get the jersey back, so that's a very crafty move by the Vaxa team. That's a great little move there, and they're chasing him flat out at the point right now. You can see it looks like the Formaggi Pinzolo team are right onto the wheel of Frankie Hoy. So this is a great battle for a little intermediate sprint. This is fantastic racing.
Perfect moving tactics, that, to try and draw the sting of the other team, the Formaggio Pinzolo Fiave team, which is exactly what they've done. And they've got Frank Hoy back in the fold now. And the rider doing the damage there was indeed Bo Hamburger, who's having a very good tour, celebrated his birthday in this race a couple of days ago, and his teammate moving up here, Miraglia, the Italian on the squad. But they've lost one of their animators, Elio Aggiano. He abandoned the race on the 12th stage in the mountains. And I reckon that dog's no more than about 8 weeks old, Bob.
Beautiful little puppy dog there from the flatlands of Lombardia. And this race course is dead flat. Here's a flat tire at the back of the group. It might be one of the stars. This is way off the back. It might be
it's a natural break.
A natural break, sorry. Why would the team car stop then?
Because it probably was Pantani. The two guys were certainly taking their time at the side of the road, which is why I think we moved away from those shots and back to the front end to the main field. But just to explain a little bit more the Inter-Giro competition, which is coming up right now, on the flat road stages, the way it works is the riders first across the line get themselves time bonuses. It is Marco Pantani coming back, and you can see the team paying an awful lot of attention to him there, and one rider stopping at the same time as Marco Pantani to make sure it doesn't get left behind and maybe picked up by the wolves, which used to be quite prolific around this area. Coming back to the Inter-Giro, Phil, there's 30 seconds for the first rider to cross the line. 24, 18, 14, 9 and 4 seconds down to 6th place, and Bagstead at the moment leads this competition by 28 seconds, so he really does have to keep himself very close to Moreno Di Biasi.
Well, the public are all waiting for the arrival, and they've all practiced the wave, and now here comes the peloton, led by the team from Formaggi, which is the team of the erstwhile leader of the Giro, Moreno Di Biasi. He seems to be on a par as far as sprinting goes with Maggie Bagstead. Bagstead obviously got the advantage in the time zone, so he really needs to win this.
He really needs to keep himself at the front end of the peloton every time we come to these flat stage sprints for the Inter-Giro, because let's not forget the last day of the Giro d'Italia this year finishes with an individual time trial, and again Bob Bagstead would have that very big advantage of being a much superior individual time trialist to the man who really is a specialist sprinter, Di Biasi.
Well, Bagstead setting the fastest first intermediate check in yesterday's time trial. Obviously he was going flat out for the Inter-Giro point, and he had a big lead on Di Biasi. Took a whole lot of time back. He was 24 seconds down in the Inter-Giro competition at the beginning of the day and wound up with a 28-second advantage, so he took a lot of time out of Di Biasi in the time trial, and now he has the blue jersey as Inter-Giro leader. You can see the Mercatoni Uno team pacing Marco Pantani back into the peloton now, and they're having a bit of a rough time getting back into the group. They must be really flying up the road at the front.
Well, it must have been an urgent call of nature for Pantani, because this wasn't the time to stop by the roadside with the peloton in full cry. That's why the whole team have been told to come back and help him now and get him back into the race. And there's just one left hanging on at the back here, and this is Massimo Codol, who's also having a great tour now and is up in 11th place overall. There he is, but he's 12-16 behind the lead, but still, he's not going to take time out to go back for Pantani while you hold a high position like that, just in case you don't rejoin the peloton. Well, Moreno Di Biasi, Paul, he's pretty well known on the eastern seaboard of the United States this year because he got second place in that new race down in Georgia.
Yes, he took one of the stages there before Freddy Gonzalez became the dominant sprinter in that bike race, and it's a pity we didn't see Freddy Gonzalez in the Giro d'Italia this year, because I think he was starting to show the form that he had a couple of years ago, and he is an absolutely superb sprinter, and I think it would be nice to see him riding one or two of the big bike races like this, Bob.
Yes, indeed. He would be great to be in the Vini Callirola team for this year's Giro, but he's a sprinter, and they wanted to defend the chances of their man Garzelli in the climb, so they've brought a team of mostly domestiques for Garzelli, and it's working quite well. He's in second place overall, but he has lost some more time. Minute 58 now, down behind an absolutely dominant Gilberto Simoni.
And if I mentioned Di Biasi, they're getting second place in the Tour Georgia, I meant he won stage 2. He did get a stage win in that event. There's the team time trial, not scheduled for this year's Giro d'Italia, but there's one for you to see anyway, as now the whole team, bar one, has dropped back to recover Marco Pantani. They'll probably ruin the day. He told them he had to stop for a natural break, but they've got him back as he races back into the peloton. There he is, and we're getting closer and closer to the Intergiro. Plenty of action to come now as the riders go forward towards Lodi. That attack didn't work by Frankie Hoy. We'll have to think of something else. We'll take a break. Welcome back, and as you return to us, this is the sprint now. Bagstedt and Biesi, and it looks to me as though it was Jan Zverada and Di Biesi just forcing out Magnus Bagstedt there. Very close. It'll go to the photo finish, but he was either second or third, Paul.
Well, there's a lot of rough and tumble. Let's look at this again. That's Di Biasi on the front. Magnus Bagstedt just swinging over there to start his acceleration. Zverada coming down the outside, looking very good indeed. And in fact, as he pushes it to the line, he'll look across, and Bagstedt will have to take third place there, although there was another rider over to the right-hand side.
A little bit of bumping. I don't think the judges will complain about that. He didn't look too bad from the helicopter, but it looked as though he gave the win to Zverada. Di Biesi getting second instead of the win, which was better for Bagstedt, as he had to cross the line there in third place. So he'll keep his lead in that competition, I think, will he?
He will keep his lead in that competition, but what is interesting is the fact that Jan Zverada, who is still up there in the overall classification there, will in fact move himself just a little bit closer to the two men at the top of the leaderboard. So at the end of the day, it will still be Magnus Bagstedt, Moreno Di Biasi, but Jan Zverada with his win moving himself just a little bit closer. He started the day in third place in that competition.
Frankie Hoy at it again here, going clear at the moment. With one of the riders there from Mercatoni Uno. Now I think it's Fontanelli, but we'll wait and see if closing on a little bit later. But those two trying to get a good time to attack, Bob, just after the sprint.
Yes, I think you're right. It was Fabio Fontanelli going off the front there, pacing Marco Pantani back into the peloton, using that momentum to go around the peloton and make a little breakaway with Frankie Hoy. After they regroup after a very hard sprint like that, it is a chance for a breakaway, and it looks like these three riders, a 10X rider that seems to have joined them, and we'll see some riders coming across, but I dare say that the pace in the peloton will not slow down at all till the finish line. It'll be very hard to stay away.
Good move by Frankie Hoy, just waiting for the counterattack to come after that. He was probably one of the riders helping out as well in the pacemaking for his man Magnus Bagstedt. He's had a very good season so far. He won a new race in Denmark earlier on in the month of May. But I think you can see here the reaction coming from the main field, who don't want any breakaways to leap off the front at this moment, and that is a very long straight line, who I'm almost certain will be touching speeds approximately 35 miles an hour right now. The three leaders, Phil, I think will very rapidly get themselves caught here.
Well, they really are moving today. They're running about 20 minutes ahead of the quickest expected time. There's confirmation of the results. Zverada getting it over Di Biasi and Bagstedt. These are the top three in this competition, and it looks like they're going to fight it out all of the way to Milan. Bagstedt of Sweden keeps his lead for the moment, at least, in that blue jersey competition, losing just a little bit of ground there in the time bonuses on the line. Now, the main field are sorting themselves out. They won't want to allow anybody to escape, not when they've got the chance here, especially for the Fassa Bortolo team of Alessandro Petacchi, looking for a fifth stage win. But here they are. It is Fontanelli, and it's Oscar Pozzi. Boy, I've forgotten he was still in the race after that crash about 2 weeks ago.
Well, he's had a couple of very nasty crashes, but you can see just how important it is to try and bounce back in a bike race like this. These three riders working very well together. They're all renowned riders for being attackers, and they're looking for the breakaway on a stage like today, hoping that the teams of the sprinters will be a little bit despondent, having lost some of their top men. There's the boss of the Giro d'Italia, Carmelo Castellano. He certainly wasn't very happy himself, was he, Bob, about the non-selection of Mario Cipollini, and said he would be taking it up at a future meeting that the bosses of all the big bike races have towards the end of this month. There still is a 10 to 15% chance that Mario Cipollini could ride in this year's Tour de France, but it would mean stretching one or two of the rules, because in fact you're only allowed to have a maximum of 200 bike riders in a top echelon event, and it would mean if they brought in Mario Cipollini's team it would go to 207. Verbruggen said he wouldn't mind, but it is a bit strange to make rules. This is a rule that was just recently founded, and then to bend it a little bit later on in the season.
200 rider limit is, I think, is a good rule, because the fields in the Tour de France, they started to get close to 220 riders, and when we see these roads across Europe and the traffic circles and the sprints, to have that many guys, especially the first few days of a bike race, going down the road together, all of them fighting for the front, it created unbelievable amounts of chaos in the peloton. I remember in 1989 there was 222 starters in the Tour de France, something like that, and it was absolutely insane. And I thought when that rule came in, it was a little bit more reasonable situation for the riders to be in day after day. They could bend it a little bit for a team like Mario Cipollini, because for the first week all those riders are only being one place on the roads, and that's at the front of the peloton doing big tempo like we see the Fassa Bortolo riders doing today. Pataki must not be feeling too bad, and he sent his riders to the front so he can try to contest the sprint, and I'm sure he was very stiff in the morning when he got up for the sign-on, and maybe he's starting to feel a little bit better out on the course. Just incredible amount of damage being done to his skin in that crash.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do is to get out and ride your bike and loosen off the muscles, and he certainly had some speed training today. 45.5 kilometres in the first hour, 46 kilometres in the second. They've come down to an overall average for the day of about 44.5, which means they're running still ahead of schedule. We keep getting glimpses of the right arm of Oscar Pozzi, and the scars look as though they're healing up nicely now, Paul, because I suppose it's about 10 days since he had that nasty prank coming down the mountain.
It's about that. He had actually two very nasty crashes in this year's Giro d'Italia. We get a chance there just to see the fact that he is starting to heal up nicely. The worst thing about having a crash in a bike race like this, Phil, is actually not really the injuries, because most often the injuries are fairly superficial. The big problem is not being able to sleep at night and recuperate. And as Bob has said on many occasions, what happens is when you roll over in bed, you come onto that sore wound and it wakes you up, and it's very difficult to get back to sleep again. And it wakes you up with a scream, and the riders next door just think you've had another nightmare, and the nightmare is you've got to get up and ride the next stage of the Giro d'Italia, as you have to do for 3 full weeks and a single day. They're all together, more or less, just chasing 3 riders up the road. Here's a question for you in our Expedia.com competition. Who is the first cyclist to win the Giro d'Italia? Answer when we come back. It is to win the Giro d'Italia. There's the 4 names for you. I hope you all went for D. Luigi Ganna won the race. It was in 1909, the first Giro. He led it for most of the way. I think he won 3 stages as well. Well, we're looking now at the live action again here. They're still trying to rip off the front. They've caught the 3 riders and another little group trying to get away. Now, this is going to be the pattern, Bob, as the teams who don't feel they've got the sprint power are going to try and outwit the field on the run into the finish. About 20 miles to ride.
Well, if the pace has been so high in the peloton that there's some fatigue coming into the legs of all of the chasing teams, there is an outside chance that a little group could stay away, but they would have to have a tremendous amount of power, because you know that not just the Fassa Bortolo riders, but also I think the Domina Vacanze team will be doing some hard tempo as we get to the finish. The Troguardo Intergiro, that's the line, and indeed it was Jan Svorada. He's in that competition too. He has a few stages left where he can get some more time for that competition, but that's a tall order for Svorada to overcome the really intense competition between DiBiase and Bangstead. In the meantime, it's still the Fassa Bortolo riders on the front of the peloton making a big tempo now, and Domina Vacanze has joined them. There's another little breakaway just going up the road now, and if the helicopter will pan up, we'll be able to see who that was.
I think there's a lot of Domo rider just sneaking out. There's not many of those bike riders left in their race for the moment as we go inside 30 kilometres to go. But certainly the teams of the lesser sprinters will take much more of a keen interest in keeping the pacemaking high, because it's a chance for them to get something out of the Giro d'Italia. Every team who comes in needs to get themselves some glory, and as we look down there at the composition of the Lotto Domo team, there are in fact only 3 riders left. The Australian Nick Gates is still hanging in there, Stigmans, who we've seen on the attack many times, and the Dutch rider Koos Moerenhout. And in fact, if we have a quick look there,
looks like Koos to me.
It's a very good move, and I think it is in fact Koos Moerenhout who's leapt off the front. It's Stigmans, actually.
It was a good try, though, Paul. I got it wrong, but I remember Koos. I had a long chat with him once at an airport in Asia as we were transferring from one race to the other, and I must say it looked like his long, slim legs. But it's not. It's Stigmans. Stigmans has known the Giro from both ends of the race this year. He fell off in the mountains. He had a long chase to finish alone one day. Now he's trying to get off the front here. Well, it would be nice for Lotto to get a result. They've had 2 stages with Robin McEwen. We just switched up towards the finishing line here, I think. This is Parville itself. Massive crowd, Bob, but this is one of the hotbeds of the sport. This is where Giovanni Lombardi was born.
Yes, absolutely. Lombardi from this town. He'd love to see his team get a win. He, I think, would have a good as chance as Benatti to win the stage, so we might see a different lead out being done for Lombardi rather than Benatti. but Pavia in the Lombardia region, a huge hotbed for cycling. A lot of the riders in the professional ranks in the Italian peloton all come from Lombardia, so I think that might have contributed to the fast pace today. Everybody wanting to get home to their home region and say hi to the family overnight.
Well, also, as we got a quick look at the finishing straight there, just to remind everybody, the final kilometres are almost all straight. But unfortunately, once again, the race organisation, Phil, have put a nice little corner in at 300 metres to go. And I find that really quite surprising that they consistently keep doing this at the Giro d'Italia. With 2 kilometres to go, it's almost a straight line up to the finish, apart from a small chicane around a traffic circle at 1 kilometre to go. And then we just saw there what we had on the screen a few moments ago was the bend at 300 metres from the finish. Nice to make it a little bit more exciting for the sprinters, who already have to have a fairly dangerous part of the sport, Bob.
Nerves of steel the sprinters needing, just so they don't touch the brakes when they're having the clash of the titans towards the line. Also, you have to have fantastic bike handling skills, because throughout these races we've seen all kinds of obstacles thrown in the way of the peloton as they've come into towns. They've been quite dangerous. They've taken out Galvez, Lopez, as well as Mario Cipollini. Angelo Furlan crashing in that sprint in San Dona di Piave a few days ago. We just saw a picture of him in the middle of the peloton. On the Alessio team, he's a very fast man. He'll be looking to get a stage in the Giro d'Italia himself, I think, today.
Well, Phil, just talking about crashes, news coming overnight of the crash of a man who we thought would ride exceptionally well at the Tour de France this year, Danilo De Luca, who missed out on riding the Giro d'Italia this year to concentrate on the Tour de France, and he went down in a training accident and in fact has broken his collarbone, and that's pretty sad when you think that the Tour de France is really nowadays only just around the corner from the end of the Giro.
But it's a compound break, and they are saying that he continued to train on the rollers indoors, but he mustn't go outdoors for at least 10 days. But he's still very confident, Paul, he can get himself in good shape for the Saeco team for the Tour.
It's amazing how quickly many of these bike riders can bounce back from an injury like that, especially a compound fracture of the collarbone. And talking about crashes and dramatic ones, we saw that dramatic crash the other day of Mario Cipollini, when in fact news coming to us here that in fact for the first time since that accident he started training again, and he's still in the back of his mind got that hope that he can possibly show himself off in his rainbow jersey at the Tour de France this year.
100 years of the Tour de France, Bob. I've not been to all of them, but I must say it is strange having the Tour without a world champion riding, isn't it?
I think that the current system that the French are using, there's a lot of arguments for and against. Jean-Marie Leblanc has really done a great job bringing that race into the modern era.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic athletic contest, and I think that his impetus, his motivation is to keep the sport in France very much alive. It's my contention, however, is the other side of the fence, where the best race in the world has to have the best athletes for it to continue to grow in popularity, and Mario Cipollini is indeed the world champion. To leave him out is a very unfortunate happenstance.
It's a piece of controversy which will go right up to the start line of the Tour de France. By the end of stage 2, nobody will mention it again. That's the way life is. As we look down now at the Giro d'Italia all together, as this is Bertolotti setting the pace on the front, and not surprisingly Patacchi's teammates keeping an eye on everybody, hoping they can take their man down to the finish and give him stage win number 5. Not too far before we know the answer. We'll take a break. And we're looking now at the riders approaching the last 24 kilometres of the day. As we saw there briefly, the champion of Norway, he's got his stage win in the bag, Kurt Arvidsson, and the team very happy with what he did for them there. And now Magnus Bagstedt is still hanging on to the lead for them in the Intergiro competition. So all that remains for the day, Bob, is to get ourselves a stage winner.
Yes, it's coming down. It looks like another one of the very exciting field sprints. The Italians really like a course that's dead flat. They love the speed and the pageantry. They love the real danger of the sprints when the whole field comes down to the end. Mario Cipollini, such a huge star. He's been so supreme at that type of competition. A lot of other riders queuing up now to try to get some of that glory away. He's out of our Giro d'Italia now. The stage winner, I think, will come from either the Fossa team leading out Patacchi or perhaps Angelo Furlan, who is also a very fast bike racer, hasn't come up with a stage yet. And the Alessio team, I think, would like to get another stage win, although they do have a man riding well up in the classification. Andrea Noe dropped a place down into 4th on that great ride yesterday by Jaroslav Popovic and New Star Cycling. So Alessio, I think they'll be trying to lead out Furlan for a stage win. It might not be quite as dangerous for the wheel of the last man in the Domina Vacanze team, but it'll still be a fast and furious sprint to the finish.
I'll tell you one thing, Bob, the Italians are not the only people who like it when it comes down to a bunch sprint, because I think both you and I still get pretty excited. It is a chance to see just how well some of these top professional teams can get themselves organised. One of the best organised teams when it comes down to the sprint is certainly the team of Mario Cipollina, Dominat Vacanze. But the team who has to take over right now, because they have got the leader in the points competition, is the team there in the white jerseys with the blue band across it, the Fassa Bortolo team. They are hoping that their man, after a ride of 207 kilometres in the saddle today, will have loosened up some of his injuries. Alessandro Patacchi going down yesterday in a very dramatic crash. It should be an exciting finish, and at least Fassa Bortolo has still got a full complement of riders to look after their man. Brusegin up there, Cione, a very good worker. Kim Kirchen there, wearing number 63. He's a rider who I think we'll see a lot of in the future. He's a Luxembourger. Frigo and Gonzalez, the two men we expected to ride high in the overall classification. Win going yesterday to Gonzalez. Patacchi, a superb ride this year in the first week of the Giro d'Italia, and then back it up with men like Tossato, Trenti, and of course Marco Velo, who's been around for many, many years. You have got a very strong squad there.
You certainly have. In fact, during the stage wins this year, only 2 non-Italian riders have won stages, which I suppose is par for the course. It tends to be an Italian-dominated race. It's very important for the Italian riders. They do well in their home tour. But the way they pack in the Italian teams into their national tour, well, I don't think they've got real complaints when the French do the same in the Tour de France, have they?
I agree with you absolutely. The Italians love to see Italians do well, and when we were racing here, they were very generous in accepting our efforts on behalf. There goes a crash right into a ditch there, and that.
I hope he can swim.
When they're going so fast.
It looks like Scott Sunderland, is it?
It might be Lars back.
It's not Scott anyway.
Well, that was an incredible flip off the road there, and Werner Riebenbauer right into the water there. Oh dear.
Well,
doesn't look happy.
Job with the washing machine, but he looks okay. That's a horrible feeling, Bob, when you go off the road into a ditch that deep, isn't it?
Well, let's see how he did it here, because
touch your wheels right in the middle of the race.
Right in the middle. I don't know how he missed everybody there. Touched wheels. This is the problem when you're at the back of the main field and you're a bit relaxed, and he really went down a fair way, and I think he'd be fairly happy there was a bit of water in that ditch.
Well, we shouldn't laugh, but it was plenty of water in there, Bob. He's fine. Hurt pride, maybe.
How those athletes avoided not crashing into him is an absolute miracle. He touched wheels himself, swerved across the road, and then went flying through the air, landed backside down, doing a real somersault there. I wonder what the diving judges would have given that.
Well, probably a 6.8, but probably a 10 for difficulty. But Phil, that reminds me of
You've got the difficulty marks. You've got nothing for style, I'll tell you.
No style, but it reminds me of a crash that I saw Sean Kelly, the great king of the classics of the 1980s, do once in a race called the 3 Days of La Panna, and I think you know that race, Bob. It's a race right up on the North Sea, dominated really by severe crosswinds. Everybody was riding along, leaning at 40 degrees into the wind to try and stay upright, and then all of a sudden we went past a building, the wind stopped, and Sean Kelly went straight into the ditch, and we thought that would be the last we'd ever see of him, because we're hammering along at 50 kilometres an hour, and Kelly comes back up to the front. Did you see that? Did you see that? I went into the ditch, I went into the ditch. And that's really how Sean Kelly spoke, very high pitch. Fortunately now he's brought the pitch down just a little bit, and we're all beginning to understand him somewhat.
Oh, he's getting a front wheel change here. So he obviously punctured his... Maybe that was the cause of the problem, was a front wheel puncture, and he couldn't control his bike in the peloton. But it's all good now. He should get back into the race anyway, and he doesn't look at all hurt. A nice aside, at 20 kilometres or so to go to the finish for Riebenbauer on the Factor team. The ups and downs of a very successful team today, really, as he now has to chase back into the peloton, which won't wait for him today, because we're only about 13 miles or so from the finishing line. But
incredible.
I hope he has a shower before he goes to dinner tonight, because the boys won't like him if he doesn't.
Well, it's really amazing that he didn't get hurt at all. I don't think he even got cut in that crash.
No.
His bike sustained a little bit of damage. But that is quite remarkable that he's not hurt at all. A very spectacular crash there, and caught right on the cameras. He's at the very end of the peloton, and that's just, you never know what's going to happen out on the roads in a big bike race.
Looks like the mechanic there, Phil, checking to see if there were any tilapia under the saddle.
Yeah. There we go. 20 kilometres to go. The field momentarily has slowed down, so he'll come back into the field. No problems at all. All 138 starters today are in this pack, and All of them hoping for a stage win, but it could be a battle of the sprinters now. And Jan Zarada's team, Lamprey, seem to be the ones sharpening up the front end of the race, because now that the big sprinters like McEwen has gone, we've lost Graham Brown, we've lost Galvaz, and of course Cipollini, then Zarada will fancy his chances today. He's had a dress rehearsal when he won the Inter Giro, just about 14 kilometres back down the road. There's the average speed, bringing the Tour back onto a record average speed. We're speeding up again. We won't miss any of the action. Not like this man, as he went down into the drink. We'll take a break.